Thank you for opening the conference. As you mentioned today, we have a fruitful program of presentations of the asset outcomes. We also will have the panel discussion later on. But now I will give floor to our colleagues in London, who are our methodological leader and who will start the conference with a little icebreaker.
Hello everyone, it's a really great pleasure to be here and to meet you all. In fact, I'm actually based in Cambridge. Dan is based in London. We've worked together over many years and jointly very frequently, but strangely enough over the last year, because of the pandemic, we've not met each other physically in 14 months. So we are the audience agency. We're especially responsible for the methodology of this project. And to begin with some of the thinking around what we'll be debating in the next 2 days, we've got a little icebreaker exercise for you. And the conference organisers will now be showing you a link to a survey, which we encourage you to click on and try out. And this will take you to a series of questions, which are some of the core questions that we used in the methodology for the segmentation of the project. It's a little bit, we've adapted it slightly for this context, but we thought it might be quite good fun to see how it works out. So please go through it. I think you can even choose the language, a language, not every language, but a language to fill it in. And it should only take you about 2 or 3 minutes. At the end of it, what you will be given is the resulting, you'll be given a result of a segment that you would be part of, you would be part of if you were answering this question for real in one of the theatres in which we've been working. Later on, we will describe what each of those segments mean. Although I think actually we've produced an end screen where it does give you a very little description of you. So it'll be interesting to see what this segmentation of this audience looks like, this conference audience. And maybe we can show you how it compares with the theatre audiences of the people that have taken part in this. Now, of course, normally, if you were an audience member, you don't get shown your segment. This is a kind of a special thing for this project, for this moment. Normally, of course, we would the segmentation really comes from the point of view of the theatres and the researchers like us that are doing it. So it's something that we actually use to kind of group people within the audience, which we will describe later on. Dan, anything you wanted to? So my role is senior consultant. Dan is research manager. Anything you want to say at this point?
No. I think you've pretty much covered it there, Jonathan. Yeah, if you could all click on the link, which I think is in the chat, then yeah, that'll take you through to the survey, and yeah, answer a couple of questions and find out what segment you are.
Yeah, I should say that the way in which this technical operation works is we can't see you very easily. We will, of course, be interacting with you later on during the sessions, either this afternoon or tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow, what Dan and I will do in the workshop, which we encourage many of you to attend who would like to, is to show some different ways in which that segmentation might work. Now, actually, as we will be talking later on, it's called, the project is very grandly called Segmentation in European Theatres, and a lot of it is about that segmentation, that grouping. But it's worth saying that really at the heart of it is research of audiences with audiences of the theatres involved. So there's a much wider range of research that we've done as part of this. I say we, it's actually the theatres that conducted the research in the end. So what we've given you in this little trial exercise in the chat is a smaller version of it. It's the particular segmentation part of it, and I think you'll notice that, for example, there are no demographic questions in it. They are purely questions around content, preference, motivation, how often you go. We're asking you to think back over what it is that you did. And we'll give you just a couple more minutes to fill that in before we go on to the next part. Mikhail, Martina, is there anything you want to say from your side at this point?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. So this was Jonathan Goodacre and Daniel Cowley, our colleagues in London and Cambridge, consultants for the theatre, the audience agency. Thank you for this. We will give you a few minutes to fulfill the questionnaire. Please see the links in Zoom in Slido, and please do fill these questionnaires. In the meanwhile, let me sum up what's ahead of us. After this, we will take you through the basics about the ASSET project, the Audience Segmentation System in European Theatres project. What's the ideas, was the aims, and what was the overall idea behind that. Before that, I would like to point out a few things that you might also do during these 2 days of the conference, and give you some hints on how to get most of the conference you can. As you might notice, we run on several platforms. The conference today, which is mainly about the presentations, unlike tomorrow afternoon part, which will be more interactive. So today you can watch us on Zoom if you join in. You can watch us on YouTube, and as well we are streamed in the Facebook event page. Please use our Slido platform. You find the link on the website, on the Facebook, and all other, and in your emails if you're registered. And you can ask questions, you can share your comments, and you can also vote for a title for tonight's watch party, because tonight we would like to see you in a more informal setup, and we would like to share a cultural experience with you. There's 2 performances that you can choose from, and this is a performance called 𝗪𝗫𝐞𝐿, a contemporary circus performance, and AI when robot writes a play, a drama, actually written by artificial intelligence, by 𝐻vandovo divadlo. So please place your vote in our vote poll in Slido, and we will share the results during the conference, and hope to see you tonight. I would also like to point out that tomorrow's program will only be performed on Zoom, and so the only way to access it is to register yourself. The good news is, if you're still not registered, you can do so, and you will receive the link into your emails. By the registration, you don't only get the link and possibility to participate in tomorrow's program, you can also take advantage of the program being interpreted into Czech and partially in German in the Zoom application, in the Zoom program, where you can choose your language you prefer. Also, the last benefit I will mention is you have the possibility to buy a special edition of the Dance Actualities, Taneční aktuality, the magazine on dance, which is dedicated to audience research. So, if you don't mind, I will do one more thing. I will introduce Martina Pecková-Černá, who is the representative of Arts and Theatre Institute here in Prague, and who will help me get you through today as a moderator.
Exactly, we will be your guides, and next to me is standing Michal Lázňovský, the head of the theater management department at the theater faculty of the Academy for Performing Arts in Prague, who is the main organizer of the ASSET project.
Thank you. So maybe now, if we have enough replies in our questionnaires, maybe gentlemen in Britain could check and tell us how's the segmentation going.
Yeah, we do have some replies. Just seeing the results coming now. Feels very Eurovision this, which is good and apt. So yeah, we have some replies coming in. I think we might leave the results till a bit later until we've got till we've tallied all the results. But if I could just remind people, when you get to the last page on the survey, if you can press the submit button down the bottom, that will send your results into us. So if you've gone through it and you've still got that end page up, if you just press the submit button, that would be great. If you didn't press the submit button and you've closed the window, feel free to go and do it again or not. Either way is fine. But hopefully a good number of you would have now found your segment, and we'll present the findings a little later on.
Okay, thank you. So we will take over the floor, and I will pass it to Martina, who will now start the presentation of the ASSET project by uncovering you the story behind ASSET beginnings.
Yes, we should probably explain how it has started everything with the ASSET project. So I will explain a little bit of its history and prehistory. And just for the introduction, I would like to mention that, of course, this conference is one of the culminations of the whole project. We have one more activity ahead of us, which is the book, which will be the final and last activity of the ASSET project, and where you will be able to find all the ASSET results. We will be talking about this book also later on and present what you will find in it. But let's get back a little bit to the history of the ASSET project. The home base of the ASSET project is the European Theatre Night, and similar audience developments events. Theatre Night encompasses events organized under the umbrella of the European Theatre Night and other initiatives, and it is a unique celebration of theatre and arts with an enormous outreach in the terms of number of involved theatres or cultural organizations and number of spectators. Although the form, conditions, contents, or communication of Theatre Night vary in the countries where it is organized, it is a truly international project, and the European idea is inscribed in its title as well as in its nature. As the national coordinators of Theatre Night from countries where it takes place regularly and continuously exchange information about the event in their respective countries, the dream to create a platform for collaboration had been present here since a long time ago. Theatre Night audience is not only an asset, but the focal point of the event, and audience development is encrypted in its DNA. ASSET became a pilot project for both, to know better European theatre audiences in order to improve the communication of theatre makers with their spectators, and to foster communication, exchange, inspiration, and ties among the Theatre Night coordinators across Europe. Since the beginning of the project planning, it was obvious that the Children's Theatre Dubrava in Zagreb, Croatia, as the cradle of the European Theatre Night, must have been one of the project partners. Many thanks to Sandra Banić-Naumovsky for the impulse to organize such an insane event, which is Theatre Night, and also for linking us to Theatre Night organizers in other Balkan countries. Vienna, as a truly European theatre capital, has been invited as a further project partner. Gerald Gröchering from 𝐸𝐴-Kultur, as the Austrian Theatre Night coordinator, became a constantly beloved colleague and companion in the ASSET project. European Theatre Night is predominantly a Central and Eastern European event, and a great work is done by Arts Projects Foundation as the coordinator of the Nošť na teatrite. Katerina Milanova and Maria Paniatova enchanted the whole ASSET team with astonishing communication formats of the Bulgarian Theatre Night. Through the ASSET project activities, we have been in touch also with further Theatre Night and similar events coordinators from Slovakia, Hungary, Spain, Germany, and Poland, mainly within the historically first Theatre Night coordinators gathering in Zagreb in 2019. And I hope that many of them are following us, at least remotely, today again. The initiative to prepare a project documentation for a Creative Europe program application was taken over by the coordinators of Theatre Night in the Czech Republic, which is the Arts and Theatre Institute in Prague. Thus, a crucial partner of the project was found, the Department of Arts Management at the Theatre Faculty of the Academy of Performing Arts in Prague, as the main organizer of the ASSET project. Thanks to that, the project coordination team has been completed, and my gratitude for an immense diligence, expertise, and patience goes to Michal Lázňovský, Ivana Černá, Viktoria Šmorancová, Eva Zavřelová, and Barbara White. It seems to be a long journey from the heart of Europe or southeastern part of Europe to Helsinki or to London. But these were exactly the places where we found really close ASSET partners and friends. Katri Halonen and Nina Torko from the Metropolia University in Helsinki, and Jonathan Goodacre, Daniel Cowley, and Peter Cook from the Audience Agency. All of them co-created an essential part of the project methodology and content. Before I will give floor to all these precious partners and colleagues, and we let them star in the conference program, let me share a hope that not only this conference, but also the ASSET project outputs will be a crucial asset to the further revelation of the potential of theatre, the European Theatre Night, and live arts in general. We need to start. We need to restart.
Thank you, Martina, for taking us into the beginnings of ASSET project. I also mentioned that in every city, the local project partners have approached 4 theatres to collaborate in examining their audiences. These theatres will be presented later by the partners, but I want to say a big thank you to all of them, as the project could not happen without their generous help. I also need to give the credit to 𝐀𝐮𝐝, which is the European Network on Cultural Management and Policy, which brought together our department or our university with the future partners, the Audience Agency and the Metropolia University, and also became our partner in dissemination of the results. So you can see that this project is a child of the 2 European parents, if I may say, and a proof that European networking support really works in practice. That I see as a source of a decent optimism that European partnership is tight and will help us overcome the significant challenges we face these days in geopolitical, economic and social areas. So last but not least, we need to thank to Creative Europe program again, and thanks for helping to raise the child. However, the ASSET project itself has more specific aims, which is to enhance the communication between cultural institutions and their audiences. Specifically, to do so, we have set these goals. to develop and test the prototype of the methodology of audience segmentation that would work in the context of a specific environment in the partner countries. That is the theater sector in the countries. To train the staff in the theaters and cultural organizations in Europe in the methodology of audience segmentation and data collection. To collect and evaluate data about theater audiences in selected European cities. Again, it's Prague, Vienna, Sofia, Helsinki, and Zagreb, and compare them with existing data in audience segmentation, which was brought as a methodology by our English partner. To help participating theaters implement outputs of the audience segmentation into their management, production, marketing, and communication in order to extend current audience groups and approach new ones. To provide international opportunities for cooperation among theaters in partner countries, but participating in the European Theatre Night and similar events to the audience development. And also to share the outputs of the project in education activities in respective universities disciplines and acknowledged networks for education in the field of audience development, and to help implement outputs from research in public policies. By facts and figures, I can mention that the total planned project costs are 275,000 euros, which 165,000 euros should be covered by the Creative Europe grant. We aimed for training at least 50 to 75 data collection managers, and you will probably find later on the numbers in practice. We aimed for 6,500 direct responses from the audience members, but also if Jonathan will mention, I believe, in his presentation, we really fulfilled that goal by far and more. Conference and symposium with participants from 14 countries is what we started with, and we're ending with today and tomorrow, and which is you part of. We also have created 5 case studies from the 5 European capitals, which will be summed up and presented in the publication of the project, which will have either electronic and also the printed form. And all the information will be able to find and check in our website assetforart.eu. So what we hope for, even through this conference, through the publication and through our activities, to reach more than 400,000 spectators through almost 800 theaters. So thank you for helping us to reach that. So now to make the things even clearer, before we reveal the practical outcomes of the asset projects, I will give floor again to Jonathan and Daniel behind the channel and ask them to please present the methodology of the project.
That you can see it okay, and someone will probably stop me if I can't, but Dan and I are just going to talk through the thinking behind this project, the research basis and the methodology of it. And thank you, Mikhail, for that very great introduction. It's been a marvellous project to work on. It's worth saying that it's one of the first projects of its type funded by Creative Europe, to have a project that's so closely tied to thinking about the audiences themselves in terms of who they are and what they feel, what they think, how they behave in terms of their attendance at theatres. And we're not going to concentrate so much today, but it's worth saying that actually, although a lot of what we're going to present this afternoon is to do with some interesting facts, some interesting data, this is actually real work which is based on real theatre performances, real people in real places. And a lot of what we did over the course of 2 years is to work with those theatres to use what they found out to actually adapt and change and do what they wanted to do, what they might want to do in their theatres. And it's worth, I put this quotation up from Anton Chekhov because I think it really reflects our view on this project, which is that knowledge is of no value unless you put it into practice. So this is very much about real working research. This is not necessary. This is not academic research. We will be talking later on this afternoon about the policy implications, and of course there are academic implications as well. But this is real, tangible research which organisations are doing, have done, and people could do. And I think one of the things we really want to say, to encourage people, is to think about doing, if you're a theatre, really to think about doing this sort of research, which we hope this afternoon and tomorrow we're going to show is not complex, it's not sophisticated, it's not magic. It's just a very clear process, a very clear logical process, thinking about what it is we want to know, and therefore how we find it out, and then what it is that we do with that. So ASSET, it was based on the research of theatre audiences in 5 cities. I've actually put in here that it's 5 cities because we just need, although a lot of the time this afternoon we will talk about Austria or Croatia or the countries, for example, it's probably worth reminding ourselves that really they were the theatres in 5 cities, the 5 cities, those countries, and that it's not we're not necessarily saying grand things about the audiences in those countries. We are looking at how those theatres have audiences, but also then what it seems to say about audiences in those cities, and then thinking about what the implications might be for some trends, for some thinking across Europe. So actually what we started off doing with working with the theatres is that we Dan and I went on a kind of a whistle-stop tour of Europe, of the 5 cities, in January and February 2019, when it was still possible to do these things. These seemed like we really have nostalgia now for those days when you could go to a place and work with people in person. But what we did in those sessions is work with theatres in those cities to ask them about what was important to them, what they thought were important aspects for their audiences. So what is it that might motivate them to go along? What is it they're interested in? What sort of things they need to know? What might we want to know about them? One of the things we wanted to get away from in this project a little bit, which I'm sure we'll return to as a discussion point over the next couple of days, is that we do want to get away from what a lot of research seems to be based on, which is based on the demographic nature of audiences. We want to look a little bit more, not just how old they are, or whether they're male or female, but also what they think about the work, what motivates them to go, what's of interest. So in those sessions, during the training sessions where they were originally training sessions where we were talking to the people in those theatres about how they might do the research and briefing them about doing research. But we also got from them some of the key ideas around the research we did, and that informs the segmentation, as you will see. And that segmentation was based on what those theatres overall thought was important. I think probably now, after 3 years, we might do slightly different things. During the process, we actually adapted the methodology slightly to adapt to the initial results that we got. So as Mikhail mentioned, in fact, in the end, we collected something like 10,000, over 10,000 questionnaire responses from just over 20 theatres. I think in the end, the main theatres, there were 22 theatres, and we also had a few more during the European Theatre Night as well. We did have some problems along the way, which we won't go into, but especially, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic curtailed some of the research. We wanted to do more audience research during 2020. We pretty much had to stop in March 2020, although some theatres, to their great credit, managed to do some research in between times later on in we managed to do some in the autumn of 2020. It meant that overall we tended to rely a little bit more on the responses we got in 2019 than we had originally thought we would. But it's fantastic. I mean, many of the theatres, probably the majority of the theatres involved in this project, had not done any research like this before, not like this, and so it was a really good result. Many of them did a fantastic, they all did a fantastic job at being able to do the research with the audiences in person, in the venues mostly. Some of the responses we did do through email, through e-surveys, but mostly face-to-face as with those audiences, and trying to get a good sample of people over that time. Just very briefly, this is how it turned out. In the book, we'll give more detail about this, but you can see that how it worked out. For example, you can see that phase 1, which was 2019, we actually got nearly 8,000 responses, and that was sort of what we're hoping for phase 2, but of course that was severely curtailed. I mean, many theatres were closed from March 2020, right, and many of them are still closed now, so it was really difficult to do that work. But even, I mean, and it's worth saying that some of the theatres who are here today, and really great to have been working with you all over the course of 2 years, are quite small theatres and with a few staff. Others are bigger theatres, national theatres, for example. The combination worked well, and actually it wasn't always that the bigger theatres managed to get lots more responses. It was a really good mix of things. Some of them, as you can see, we got a little bit more in phase 1 than phase 2. We did have a phase 3 in the end. It was really only Croatia. Bravo, Croatia, for getting some responses in the autumn of 2020. I think it was, maybe slightly earlier. And those, because of the way in which we conducted, we haven't included those phase 3 results in the segmentation. Segmentation is really based on phase 1 and phase 2. So the way in which it worked is that we did the initial research based on those questions, based on the ideas that we identified, as I said. And then in the middle of 2019, together with the partners that Mikhail and Martina were mentioning, we looked at the results and we thought, what does this mean? What do they seem to show so far? What are the initial segmentation strategies that we can look at, which we then wanted to adapt for 2020, which we did. The questionnaires we adapted slightly for the second phase to help accommodate for the more things we wanted to know around segmentation. The other thing we did was, during that process, we actually worked individually with each theatre on their own results. And this is a really important part of the asset project, that each of the theatres were able to look at their own research, and especially to look at what they might do differently, how it impacted either their marketing or their programming or other things, like the way in which their operations were. And the original idea of asset, it didn't quite work out in practice because of the pandemic, was that people would work with that, introduce some strategies as a result of the first year, and then we would see how they went. We were able to do that a little bit, but not quite as we had intended. So we've had to sort of, you know, in a way, it is still to be seen as the pandemic fades away, hopefully, and as people go into other times, some of the results which they've found will be taken forward. We also, I don't think it was really mentioned in the introduction, but a really important part of this overall project was the fact that we were working with, as part of the European Theatre Night project. This was not necessarily the case in Finland, but the other 4 countries were participants in European Theatre Night, happening usually in November each year. And that comes through this. I know that Martina will talk about this later. But we wanted to look at European Theatre Night as a phenomenon, perhaps like what is its role as an audience development mechanism or another mechanism in our work. So that also came into our work. So in that initial phase, we did actually do a little bit of, we did have a few results that we looked at. There were some quite nice myths that were discarded quite early on. Of course, when you talk to people about why audiences do or do not attend, one of the things that people often land on straight away is the ticket price. What we actually found through this project, it goes right through, of course it varies by theatre and varies by city, is that things like the ticket price were not necessarily especially important. And this is verified by other parts of the research as well, where the value for money comes through as a very good, and as people valuing that highly. But you can see that as we look down, this is all the theatres together. This is a kind of a summary from the first phase, 2019. We could begin to see that how important certain factors were in the decision to come. And for example, the theme or subject matter, I think, turned out to be the most important overall. Not to say that any of the others are not important. This all came into the equation. We also had a look at this. This was something of great interest to the theatres because it was very practical. It was very much something that people could look at, and they could go to their restaurant or bar and say, you realise that people think our restaurant and bar is inadequate. You realise that people don't think our chairs are very comfortable. What are we going to do about it? So a lot of the people really valued the fact they could use some of this evidence, this work, in internal conversations within their theatre. I think this is an important thing that we need to talk about later on. Always with data, with research like this, there's always a factor of we need to be careful. These are trends. So whilst food and drink facilities, for example, was the lowest rated of these particular factors, let's not ignore the fact that 24% were very good, 34% were good. We're talking about tendencies here, but tendencies can be quite useful and comparisons can be quite useful as well. So just have a look now at the thinking behind segmentation. We've kind of started, we've dived into this conference this afternoon with a kind of an assumption that we know that we all agree what we're talking about. There isn't agreement on segmentation generally. There are different views of it. There are different views of what it is, in fact. What we will be saying in these couple of days is that, as far as we're concerned, segmentation can be about grouping sets of people based on particular types of shared characteristics. And those shared characteristics are not defined as from the stars or from God or something. These are things which you yourselves need to decide are the important ways of grouping those audiences. I think this is a really important point because there is a notion that there are segmentation systems out there in the world that kind of can embrace all circumstances and can just be applied wherever and without cultural variance. That is certainly not what we're saying. I think from our work at the Audience Agency, it's fair to say that as we work across a range of countries and a range of circumstances, we begin to get a sense of the sorts of groupings that are quite useful, and we certainly brought that to this project. But it's and one of the things in this project is we've kind of moved away from demographics a little bit. Demographics are useful ways of talking about our audience. Of course, you might want to talk about young or old, or people for different generations, whether they're family. It, for me, encapsulates quite well why segmentation can be important, because if you take, supposing you were taking age as a category, that top right-hand corner graph shows that if you looked at the average age of this audience, say, or as any factor, it would look at that in that middle point, say it was 40. But actually the underlying reality of that that theatre audience might be that you've got a peak of people in their 20s and early 30s and a peak of people in their 60s and 70s. Now, statistically speaking, the average would be 40, but actually look at that audience, you've hardly got anyone of the age of 40 in that audience. You can take that across a range of things. I think Seth Godin's one is about people who are happy or unhappy in their experience. So that's why segmentation is useful in our opinion, because it's about grouping people together in a useful way that makes a difference. And it's a bit of a tricky process when you actually go to a slightly more sophisticated process of segmentation, because you need to decide what is similar within a group, who are the people that are similar, and what is different between them and other groups. So there are certain circumstances we've seen segmentation where there are loads and loads and loads of segments. In the UK, the Mosaic profiling system, which is a kind of an audience public profiling system, there are 64 different types. Not sure how useful 64 different types are for people. Sometimes you might even want 2 segments that are meaningful to you. In this project, actually, where we came to is around 10 segments, which we'll show you. So in a minute, I'm going to pass over to Dan, just to kind of take through how we thought through the methodology for the segmentation. But just to re-emphasize here that it's not magic. It's not magic in the sense that these are constructed ways of looking at the audience. We have decided on those. The audience are responding to what we're asking them, and we're then using what they respond to make those segments. But they're not defined for all time. They're not star signs. You're not born in a segment and die in a segment. You are involved in a whole range of things. This is a useful way of looking at it. And there are many ways of doing it. You could look at the demographic things. You could, a lot of segmentation systems look at, for example, frequency of attendance. And in ours, we did incorporate frequency of attendance. That is how often people go to the theatre. We often find is quite a useful way of thinking about them. There's quite a strong difference between people who go every week, people who go every year, people who go every 2 years or so, and people who hardly ever go. They're really often quite fundamentally different types of people. And then there are different methodologies for segmentation. A lot of people, for example, around attendance actually use their ticketing system. They look at analytics. So you might look at who your big users of your website. That might be a key thing for you. In this project, it's mostly based on questionnaires and surveys, and that's because we wanted people to respond to some quite qualitative type questions about what they think about things. And in general, if you're going to find out any of those other things like demographic information, you have to ask people. You can't find that out from ticketing, not very easily. You have to ask people about those things. There's another way, which in the UK we use this thing called geodemographic profiling, which on another day we could talk a bit about, but it's based on how you use secondary data to understand the characteristics of people. So where they live, for example, if you know where people live, you know things about the place where they live, and you can make implications of what that means. I'm going to pass over to Dan, hopefully. Dan, are you there?
Okay, so I'm just going to run through quite quickly how what the segmentation model ended up looking like. I think Jonathan's already touched on some of this already, so I might jump over some bits, but let's see how it goes. So we did our consultation with all the theatres involved to get an understanding of what would be useful for them. So fundamentally, there's not really any point in doing a segmentation if it's not actually going to be useful. And a good way of thinking about what might be a useful approach is thinking about how you imagine your audiences at the moment, what kind of informal ways you think about the different types of people who visit your theatre. So the idea is that by understanding how we currently think about audiences and how we might like to put a segmentation system to use and the change we want it to make, we can come up with some primary characteristics. So these are the characteristics or attributes that individual visitors to your theatre have, which determine which segment they fall into. And then there are also secondary characteristics, which are attributes that your visitors have, which don't determine which segment they fall into, but do help us understand a bit more about the specifics and the differences between these segments. So on the primary characteristic side, we went down a route of thinking about people's content preferences and what's more important to them when they're choosing to go to the theatre, and also to a lesser extent what their preferences are in terms of how much information they like to receive in advance about what they are going to go and see. We tweaked this a little bit, which I think I'll mention in just a second. So that's kind of our working model to start with. So the segmentation was really built at the heart of it. There's these 3 questions where we asked people to place themselves on a scale. So we've got 3 different scales. One, asking people to choose whether they like to see something new or whether they like to see something classic. And we're aware these are, potentially slightly false dichotomies, which is fine. People can put themselves in the middle if they like to see new and classic things equally. Secondly, about whether people like a lot of information beforehand or whether they like to take a chance on what they see. And thirdly, whether people prefer to see well-known performers, maybe famous people from TV or film, or whether they prefer to see new up-and-coming talent. Again, not necessarily a binary choice, but people could place themselves anywhere on that scale. And then people's responses to those questions, that's fine. Let us know how we can group them. And it's really about the idea that preferences can change over time. So people's segment might change over time, but it's quite important that these things aren't visit specific. So we're asking people in general, where would they put themselves on the scale, not thinking about this particular visit you've made to the theatre or thinking about your most recent visit, what sort of thing was it? It's about people's general preferences. So our first go at the segmentation, we used those questions and had a kind of a hierarchy. So if people were on the end of the scale which said they like to see something classic, then they'd get put in that purple segment. If they didn't, then we go down to the next stage and say, did they put themselves on the I like a lot of information beforehand scale? If so, they go into that kind of orange segment. If they didn't say that, then we go down to the next layer and so on and so on. So within this, there's a bit of a flaw or a drawback to it, which is that the segments which are allocated earlier in that flow process are going to have people in them who maybe would have actually fallen into one of the later categories, or maybe have a stronger preference for one of the later categories. But they're arranged like this, so we'd end up with a decent number of people in each segment. That's kind of our first draft. And that resulted in quite a lot of people falling in that one yellow segment which we called the middle ground at the time. So that's people who make their way all the way down that previous chart and don't really have any strong preferences. So they've put themselves somewhere in the middle on that new versus classic and information versus taking a risk and seeing famous faces versus seeing new talent. They've kind of fallen in somewhere in the middle on all of those things, which perhaps isn't that surprising, but the outcome of that is we've got some segments which aren't, we've got one segment which is massive, and ideally you want to have smaller segments than that to be useful. So to make it a bit more useful, we introduced a system whereby if people's strongest preference is for seeing something classic, say, then they'd fall into that segment. Or if their strongest preference was for seeing well-known performance, then they'd fall into that segment. So it's really looking at, what's people's strongest preference. And if they don't have a strong preference, then that's fine as well. In that instance, we use the second question on this slide to understand a bit more about, so you might not have a strong preference, but do you go and see a wide range of things, or do you go and see quite a narrow range of art forms? And do you go, compared to your fellow country people, do you go and see lots of different art forms, or do you stick to one or two, essentially? So bringing those in meant we could be a little bit more accurate and probably a little bit more realistic in the segments people fall into. So we ended up with these 9 segments, which you will hopefully recognise if you did the segmentation survey earlier. If you haven't, go and do it. You'll have seen that you were assigned one of these groups at the end based on those questions that you asked. So we've tried to give them names which roughly describe what they do, and also give them short one-line descriptions which describe their primary characteristics. So how it was that cultural grazers came to be put in the cultural grazers segment. So we're going to explore that a bit more, I believe, this afternoon, and we'll go into a bit more detail about the secondary characteristics and how those segments differ from each other. But we ended up with a more even split of different types of theatre attenders. So that now means that each segment is big enough to take notice of and think of as a distinct group, yet no segment is that big that it would just include a really wide range of people, which makes it hard to deal with. We'll have a little bit of a deeper look at secondary characteristics later on, but we can do things like see how the age profile differs for each of the groups, and a lot of the groups will have a similar age profile, but some of them will have quite distinct peaks and troughs compared to others. So this is just an example of that, which we'll look at in a bit more detail later. So please do come and join us for that session. I think is that coming up next, Jonathan?
Yeah, after the break.
Great.
Dan and Jonathan for this presentation. We are coming to the end of the first conference section. Before we announce a short break, I would like to remind our audiences that the conference has also an on-demand section programmed, where you can find teasers and theater productions from the countries which are taking part in the asset project. And you are very warmly welcome also to vote what full production would you like to watch this evening in frame of the watch party. So please use the Slido poll to decide if you will see 𝐁𝐵𝐞𝐿 by 𝐀𝐮𝐝𝐿 or When Robot Writes a Play of Švandovo Theatre in Prague. We will be back again in 10 minutes at 2:10 with the next part of the Asset Conference program.
Thank you very much for having us online, and we'll looking forward to see you back at 2:10. Hello, dear audience. Welcome back after the break. We remind you, you still can vote on the watch party title for tonight. You can also see our on-demand section with all the videos by our partners. And now I will give floor back to our partners in Great Britain. Please take the floor.
So we started looking at the segmentation. Now it gets exciting. What actually happened is the question, which I know you want to know the answer to. I thought I'd put this quotation in from Carol Churchill. She's a British playwright, contemporary. I love this. There was someone called Hippasus in Greek times who found out about the diagonal of a square, and they drowned him because no one wanted to know about things like that. Like what? Numbers that make you uncomfortable and don't relate to oranges. So we're now going to show you some numbers that might make you uncomfortable and don't relate to oranges. These are some of the results. We don't have a huge amount of times, but here we're going to give some of the overall, a flavour of what we found out, some ways in which we might think about the audience, some things you might want to think about. And then in a few minutes time, in the individual countries, they are also going to give their interpretation of the project and what it meant for them. Just to be clear, the questionnaires, we haven't talked a lot about how we actually put the questionnaires together. It's a bit boring, and if anyone wants to know, we can talk about some of the boring sides of this. But really, the key part of a project such as this, the 20 and plus theatres in 5 countries, is that we needed to have enough questions in the questionnaires that were similar, that we could compare them. What happened was that some of the countries obviously have different needs, different cultural variances, different nuances, which meant that in some countries we asked some questions and not in others. We also asked them slightly differently. I should really emphasize that when we were putting the questionnaires together, we liaised very closely with our partners to make sure that the language that was used was saying what we thought they would, because of course we work in English a lot, and even in international English we don't agree about what things mean. So in every country they were all delivered in the language of that country. In a couple of the countries they also had the possibility to use English language questionnaires as well, which is quite useful because some of them had international tourists which we're able to get from. We used a mix of closed questions, that's the yes no type questions, tick this box questions. We used ratings questions, which those segmentations were based on. You know, put yourself on a scale between 1 and 10, so whether you think it's very good, good, not good at all type questions. And open questions, which are, there are no defined answers. Today we're not really going to have time to talk about some of the open responses that people came up with. They did inform our thinking, and they were especially useful for the theatres, with people being able to tell the organisers, the venue managers, like I said earlier, that they could never get to the bar to order a drink during the interval. Those sorts of things often came through the comments. We did collect some background information, such as attendance, because what we needed to be wary of in this project is just being careful about the biases and the fact there were more responses at some than at other theatres. Some theatres are bigger than other theatres, so we used a mixture of things. Sometimes we used what we call weighting, whereby we use things like how big a theatre is to show how much they might be in that population. Sometimes we average things out where people have got smaller responses compared to larger responses. But it does mean that overall, I think we can be fairly confident that within the project, within the partners, that the answers are relatively robust. As we said, we would have liked to have had a little bit more in phase 2, but we had a good response. We have done some comparisons between theatres, between the cities. stroke countries, between different groups and between the segments. I'm going to show you those now. And as I said, for the theatres themselves, we actually produced some useful insights for them. So let's go to the one that everyone always wants to know the answer to, is how old are people going to these theatres? As you see, when you show a graph like this, it's not terribly meaningful, except to say that the age range across most of the theatres was quite broad. It tended to be a little bit younger than people had expected, and we think this is partly to do with the fact that the theatres that we were talking to were all in kind of urban centres, mostly in the capitals of those countries. So that kind of impacted a little bit on the age. We find it in UK as well, where London audiences are a little bit different from other audiences in the UK and might be younger and more frequently attending as well. But of course, what we do have is some variances across the countries. In particular, there's the Finland has whichever way we look at it, Finland tends to have a slightly different age profile from the others. By the way, Finland's age profile is a little bit more similar to the UK. So in the UK, we tend to have, when we look at the overall country, not necessarily London, we tend to have older audiences. They vary a little bit, and we see this kind of up and down nature to those things. You can see that, for example, you start to see some peaks, like the Bulgaria age profile is very particularly goes up into the kind of the 30s and then gradually declines to the 70s. Other ones like Czech Republic has this, which is the dark blue line. This is this kind of quite interesting double peak type thing where it has some younger people and then some older people. Croatia, in this sample, was quite young. Actually was a little bit impacted by the fact we were really working in Zagreb with theatres that tended to have a younger audience. I think, and I was just looking at Darko Lukić's evidence earlier, who's going to be talking in the panel. I think overall you would see that in Croatia, the population, the attendance at theatres would be a little bit different. But anyway, that's where we are. This maybe is a little bit of a surprise, but quite a lot of the people involved answering the project were quite regular attenders. The 62% of people who had attended within the last year, 24% of those who had attended more than a year ago, and 14% in a first visit. First visit might either mean someone coming for the first time and then subsequently comes, or it could, of course, mean someone just coming once only, as a random visit. It's worth bearing in mind in this project because it means a lot of the answers that we are getting, a lot of the results we're looking at are kind of a little bit more around the core attenders, the regular attenders, than necessarily other parts of the population. This does vary considerably between countries and theatres, but broadly speaking, that's how it is. So if you have a look at this, the other thing that influenced it a little bit was that the research in Finland was a little bit more based around e-surveys, and e-surveys tend to, because they're based on very often the mailing list of those places, tend to be a little bit more core rather than first-time attenders. So you can see here, for example, there's quite a lot of the Finnish audience have been quite recently. Compare that to Austria. 37%, only 37% of the people we talked to in Vienna had been in the previous year. And actually, the more we've worked in Vienna, the more we understand that the theatre going public in Vienna is quite, how would you put it? I want to say a bit more flirtatious. Maybe that doesn't quite describe it, but are more likely to kind of go to different sorts of venues within a kind of a range of different things. A little bit, people in Vienna are obviously much less loyal than in other cities. Gerald will correct me on this aspect later on. So, as well as the first visit, lots of people from Austria from that, but otherwise, quite an interesting pattern. That's quite a lot of people. Those recent visit, as we said. Now, in this project, and generally, we're very interested to look at motivation. I think this is one of the key things, having worked internationally myself a lot and worked on research. I think this is something which people neglect a little bit. Of course, neglect in research, that is to say. And it's difficult to do, because how do you decide what people might think, what people might choose? So in this project, what we did was we combined what we knew a little bit about UK and other audiences in terms of some types of things people might be motivated for, and also talking to the theatres themselves to understand what might be important. This might be a surprise to people. It's not a surprise to me. Almost any research we do when we look at these things, to be entertained comes out as the highest one. By the way, it doesn't come out as the highest one in Finland, I'll show you. But generally, to be entertained comes out high. By the way, just to be clear, the reason why it doesn't add up to 100% this is because people could tick as many as they wanted. So this is the answer where people could tick the different things that might encourage them. And then, you know, or maybe a little bit of surprise for people, things like to be intellectually stimulated or for educational reasons, a little bit lower down. Worth remembering, when it comes to motivation, many of those are really quite motivated by some of those things that are not necessarily to do with intellectual or educational aspects. That's sometimes a bit of a problem for some people. Of course, it changes. These are summarized a little bit. Identity is that one which is to do with theatre or dance or circus, is an important part of who I am. This is quite an interesting aspect, which relates to the segments, which we'll show later. Some people feel that going to the theatre demonstrates something about who they are, that this is an important thing about making a statement about who they are, that I'm a theatre person, I'm a contemporary dance person, I'm an improvisational comedy person. These are the sorts of things that might come under the identity badge. Social, as you can see, overall is the highest one, and social is to do with going with people, meeting other people there, having a night out, all those sorts of things. Actually very, very important in terms of attendance. Right, this is, of course, we won't dwell on this, but it's, by the way, this is some of the things that theatres really found fascinating, because many of the people we were working with were from the marketing communications departments. Of course, they wanted to know how well their marketing communications were working. Might not be a bit of a surprise, this word of mouth often comes up high. I think word of mouth, for those of us who've been working in this era for, let's say, a few decades, we can say that word of mouth has changed a bit. I think if it was 30 years ago, we could definitely say that word of mouth is about people telling someone else by phone or meeting them in the street. Now it's quite clear that word of mouth might also include social media as well. So that sometimes includes word of mouth, people telling each other, for example, but still using, for example, WhatsApp or Messenger or Snapchat or to tell people, not necessarily social media in the sense of Facebook, Instagram or Twitter, which is slightly different. Anyway, that's another big debate. But I think what's interesting is that we can see that all those different things are important. Again, you maybe start to see a relationship between motivation here and information. So if you remember what I was saying about Austria, about people in Vienna being more flirtatious with their theatre going, you can see that, for example, in Austria, they have the word of mouth came up as a much higher thing, because that's very much about people in Vienna saying, have you seen this? Have you been to that? This was good. We should go to that sort of thing. Whereas the other things, direct. So in Finland, for example, the direct information, which is direct mail, so actual letters to the post, brochures given to people, e-surveys, that sort of thing, much more important. And they, of course, tend to be people on the databases of the theatres and used in that sort of way. Organic are those other things which are not where we put them out directly, but things like social media, other kind of press, for example, press and media, those sorts of things. So you can see how those things might vary. How good was the experience? I showed you a little bit this earlier, but this is overall through the 2 phases. What I showed you earlier was from the first phase only. And again, I think it's always worth reminding ourselves that these people in these theatres think the performances are great. The quality is fantastic. That's very, 60%, nearly 2/3 of the audience overall are saying that the quality performance is very good. And if you take very good or good together, what have we got? 94% of people are saying that the quality of performance is very good or good. That's got to be a good sign. Like we said before, a little bit further down towards the bottom, food and drink facilities. This really varies by country, but in some countries for sure, some of the audiences were saying we come here for the performances. If the food and drink facilities in the theatre were better, we would really enjoy them, but they're not. So that varies, but an important thing. And as I said, this was very interesting to the theatres themselves, because they could take some of these things and matched with the comments could use them to talk internally about these things. So I'm going to pass over in a second to Dan again, because what we got now are the how the segmentation turned out overall. Dan, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Okay, so yeah, let's have another look at the segmentation. So I think we saw this pie chart earlier, and this summary of the different segments. So just as a reminder, we have these 9 segments based on people's preference, and also based on people's actual number and breadth of and types of art forms attended, if they didn't express a clear content preference. So what we'll do now is we'll just have a look at each of those segments in a bit more detail, so you can kind of think, can you imagine those sorts of people in your audience? Do you think that you maybe have more or fewer of them? The sorts of theatres you will go to, what do you imagine their mix of different sorts of people might be like? So I'm just going to set myself a little timer so I don't spend more than 1 minute on each of these slides.
Okay.
Let's give it a go. Jonathan, if I do, ring that virtual bell or something. Okay, so also I should say these segments are in no particular order. No one segment's better than any other or more valuable than any other. There's no particular reason for the order that these are in. Okay, so first up we have classicists. So this is 5% of all the survey respondents once they're weighted. So based on this research, maybe 5% of European theatre audiences fall into this category, based on the theatres at which the research was undertaken. So this segment is defined by the fact they prioritise seeing something classic or established productions over seeing something new, seeing new talent, or seeing well-known performers. So the strongest preference is for classic established productions. And some of their secondary characteristics include that they're more likely to be in the middle age groups. They're less likely to actually end up going to see contemporary or experimental theatre and that sort of thing. So their secondary characteristics in terms of what sorts of things they actually end up going to see do tend to back up the fact that they've identified their main preference is for more classical or well-known things. And then next up we have star lovers. I should also mention that these names of the segments may or may not translate brilliantly. So we're presenting them in English, but I think if this segmentation system was to be developed, then these descriptions would be revised for each country to make sense in everybody's languages. Anyhow, star lovers make up about 11% of respondents or the audience. These are the people that prioritise seeing well-known performers. That's the main thing they're interested in more than anything else. And they are more likely to visit for a social experience. They like more information beforehand compared to most of the other segments. And you get a relatively high number of first-time attenders at the theatre that fall into this category. And next up we have Who do we have? Talent spotters, our old friends, talent spotters. So these make up about 6%, so a relatively small segment. These are the people that really prioritise seeing new talent more so than seeing something classic, seeing new content, or seeing well-known performers. And in terms of their secondary characteristics, they have an age peak in the 20s, so they're a little bit younger than most of the other segments on the whole. They're quite happy taking a chance with what they see, so they don't need to have lots of information beforehand. And they pick that identity about theatre or the art form as an important part of who I am, so their own sense of identity is quite tied up with their theatre attendance.
Contemporaries.
Contemporaries, here we go. Yes, so
everybody's favourite segment.
They're your favourite segment.
A lot of people have their favourite segment.
I wonder how these, how big these will be amongst the conference attenders.
Yes.
We'll find out in a minute. So these are people who prioritise seeing new work above everything else, and secondarily, they do prefer to know a lot of information beforehand. So those two things combine to define this segment, and they tend to, compared to other segments, they're more likely to live locally to the places, the theatres that they're visiting. They tend to use a relatively wide range of information sources compared to other segments. They're less likely to hear about things through word of mouth, so through like informal recommendation. So perhaps they're more likely to hear about things from emails or from mailing lists direct from theatres, and they're the sort of people who are more likely to see themselves as theatre people. It's again quite a core part of their identity.
Explorers.
Explorers. Now these are similar to contemporaries in terms of how they're defined. So they also like seeing new productions, new work. However, compared to contemporaries, explorers are quite happy to take a chance on the exact details of what that new work is. So they're more comfortable with not knowing so much about a production beforehand. Again, these are a relatively small segment, about 5% of audiences. But again, these are quite likely to live local. They're more likely than other segments to visit with children. They're still not massively dominated by people visiting with children, but 33%, according to the sample that we took, about 33% of explorers visiting with children is their dominant mode, like their main motivation for visiting.
Mainstreamers, the biggest group.
Yes. So now we're on to the final four segments, and none of these have a strong content preference. So they're defined in slightly other ways based on the types of art forms that they actually attend. So mainstreamers are the largest segment, as you might expect, because they are, as the name indicates, they're kind of the mainstream core audience who doesn't have strong content preferences. So they're happy with seeing classic work, they're happy with seeing new work, new performers, new talent. They'll see a wide range of things in terms of their content preferences, but they do prefer the mainstream theatre art forms. And mainstream in this project has been defined country by country. So we look at the most popular art forms in each country, and those are determined as being the mainstream art forms in that country. So this means that, if you're a mainstreamer, you like things which your fellow country people also like. And these people tend to be motivated by social and experiential reasons. And they're kind of in the middle in terms of being happy to take a chance on using lots of information.
They want to be sure. They want to be sure they're going to have a good time. They want entertainment is sort of part of it.
That's right. Yeah. And they're more like
Persuadables.
Yeah, so these are similar. These also don't demonstrate any dominant preference about content, but they do tend to visit more niche art forms. So again, we look at the most common or least commonly experienced art forms in each country, and these people are the people that tend to do things which their fellow country people aren't doing so much of. So we've called these niche art forms. So these make up 9% of the audience, which makes sense.
Just to quickly add, there's some of the secondary characteristics of this group quite interesting. They are people who tend to come from further afield, so they're not necessarily very close to the venue, and they tend to be a little bit, it seems they're a little bit less frequent attenders, so they think about things and a little bit more of an idea of a special treat now and again.
Could be, indeed. And these, again, information-wise, they don't necessarily need lots of information. They are the most likely to visit with friends and family, but not children.
Pick and choosers.
Yes, so again, these don't have one clear preference in terms of the content. But their attendance habits show a relatively limited range of art forms. So they may or may not be attending mainstream or niche art forms, but they're only attending perhaps 1 or 2 or 3 different types of theatre within a year. Again, this is done on a kind of a country by country basis. So these make up 11% of European theatre audiences. These are most likely to be first-time visitors to the venue at which they were interviewed, compared to the other segments. They're also the most likely to visit alone.
And interestingly, when I was talking to some of the theatres about this particular segment, you get in some places, not all, you can see that a lot of people who might follow a particular company or particular artist are often in this group. And that's also why so for example, if there's a touring theatre company, touring dance company, they might follow that company and go to different venues, which seems to be partly why they might be first-time visitors to the venue, even though they're a little bit more, they're fairly frequent attenders nevertheless.
So that brings us on to the final segment of our 9, cultural grazers. Not sure how the word graze translates. We're not talking about the sort of graze that you might fall over and hurt your knee. We're talking about grazing like cows or goats might do. So these make up 17% of European theatre audiences. I think our own Peter Cook is one of these. I think she came up with the name. Good shout, Peter. So this segment doesn't have one clear preference in terms of their content. They attend a relatively wide range of different art forms. So they're relatively frequent attenders as well, who possibly have a loyalty to individual venues. But yeah, the key thing is that they attend a wide range of art forms. In the field of theatre, they graze from all the different parts of the paddock, if that helps. So this segment, secondarily, they tend to be fairly close to the average audience member. On all the different scales, they, on average, somewhere in the middle. They're most likely to be informed by direct marketing, so whether that's emails or newsletters from venues. So they're relatively clued in to what's available and what's out there. And they have a slight preference for information in advance. So they tend to be making a somewhat informed choice about what they're choosing to go and see. So those are all our segments, and just in terms of how they differ from country to country in terms of their size, there's quite a lot of consistency, which is good. So I think that suggests to us that this sort of a model could be appropriate for using across multiple countries with their different theatre histories and different theatre offers and different kind of cultural contexts as well. Some clear differences, such as Austria having a larger proportion of explorers than other countries, and and Bulgaria having a relatively large proportion of classicists, for example.
Yeah.
Again, this will be slightly informed by the individual theatres in each country who are involved in the research and the particular art forms and audiences that they attract. But yeah, good to see there's consistency, a good degree of consistency amongst the countries. Now I think it's the moment you've all been waiting for, which is how the attendees of this conference.
What about you lot? Yeah.
Yeah. So here we go. So quite different from the European theatre audience as a whole. Cultural Grazers being the largest proportion, 38%, compared to 17% of the European theatre audience as a whole. And the other big difference being, perhaps unsurprisingly, mainstreamers who make up about a quarter of the European audience, only 4%. So only probably a few of us at the conference would fall into that category, which I think probably makes sense.
And although this has been a bit of fun, I think that it's worth saying, I mean, we do this in our consultation when we're working with organisations generally. It's worth remembering that a lot of our audience are not people like us. This is something that is obvious, but people ignore it. And this is not just a theatre thing. This is a thing across the cultural sector, because we often talk in our communications, in our thinking around programming, we think that the audience is just like us. They're not just like us. Some of them are. Some of them have very different reasons for wanting to go, and they're very different sets of people, and that's important to remember. And the other thing about segmentation is that it's really clear that there are different people in our audience, there are different reasons for going, different motivations, different things that people need. One thing doesn't fit everyone. That's something that's really key part of segmentation.
Absolutely. So I think it's back over to you, Jonathan.
Back over to me. Sorry, yeah. So just to kind of, what is the consequence of this? What are we actually going to do with this knowledge? This is a question we're often asked a lot, and I think we can discuss this in this conference a lot, because there is, as I said, there's a very basic thing around context and vision, which is really understanding, like I just said, who the audiences tend to be, what sort of interests they have, what sort of things they're looking for, and really that's a kind of understanding the society, the world we live in, which is before we do anything in terms of our strategy, but also how it meets our vision. What is our vision? Are we a theatre that's for a particular, that's trying to do a particular thing? That's great, that we've got a vision, but how does that vision relate to what is the reality in terms of where we are? And then the mission side of it is looking at where are we strong, where are we weak? Are we reaching the audiences we want to reach? Have we got those, are we looking for more people interested in contemporary work, and actually not people seem to be interested in contemporary work? Who are they? It leads up into strategy. So, for example, when we're talking to the actual theatres and we're looking at their segments, there's some really interesting, when we actually talk to the theatres, you can get a real sense of why that theatre audience is segmented as it is. I think there's no one that I've talked to when we were doing the consultations that thought their segmentation was kind of inaccurate or didn't reflect their audience. Sometimes they were a bit surprised, but they could say, now I look at it, I can understand why that might be. There's some interesting variances. So some theatres have quite an even spread of segments, lots of different ones, and some have very dominant segments. So some have, like the audience today, very dominant of cultural grazers. More than a third of the audience are cultural grazers. If we were programming for this audience today, what would that mean? And then, of course, there's an actual specific thing around campaigning. Now, you can get very precise around this, and this is something that's a possibility as a result of the segmentation, which is that some people, not in this project so far, but what you can do is if you're like today, you could ask people to answer particular questions, and you could give each individual person a tag and say, this person is from this segment. And then when you're doing your campaigning as a marketing person, you might say, right, okay, we've got this part of our program, what this offer that we're putting through, and really we can think that those that might attract a particular segment. Let's kind of go to that segment. Let's send an e-newsletter to them. So you can use in those different ways, from the broader context right up to campaign. So just in a minute, what we're going, the theatres from the different, sorry, not the theatres, but the partners representing the theatres in those different countries are going to talk about how this relates to their own particular cities and countries. Just want to say this, just to be clear, we can debate this, but I want it to be clear that we're not saying that these are necessarily, although the project is rather grandly termed segmentation with European theatre, we're not necessarily saying this is a segmentation that can be applied willy-nilly across all theatres across Europe. That's not the idea of this. This is not some kind of definitive thing. It's we can't put, this is in Europe, we could do that, but that's not what this is about. This is about these are the views about current audiences at the participating theatres. But interestingly, as we do look at it, as Dan was saying, when we start to look at the segmentation across countries, you can see that there are some commonalities which can be really useful. And then the commonalities mean sometimes it's the differences which is really useful. So if we were looking at today's conference attenders, and only 4% of them are mainstreamers, whereas 27% of theatre audiences are mainstreamers, that's quite an interesting distinction. What does it actually mean? And if you're doing audience development work, who is missing? Who might you get? Who's in your local population? Might be something to have a look at. And this is only one ingredient in our understanding, but I think that what we're really looking at in this conference is that it helps to inform our decision making, our ideas. It doesn't replace anything. We still have to be imaginative. We still need to be clever. We still need to have vision. We still need to do interesting things. But what we can do is use this based on some degree of evidence and fact that helps to inform our work, which I think is certainly one of the things we'll be looking at with the policy making and the panel later on this afternoon. So let's fill back.
Maybe I'll just take this point to very quickly say a big thank you to all the theatres who spend hours and hours and hours of time doing the research and actually collecting all this data, because to be honest, that's the hardest part, gathering all the data in the first place. So a big thank you to if anybody from the participating theatres is here today, your hard work is very, 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 very much appreciated.
So passing back over to our host, Michał Laźnowski.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for the floor. Thank you for a brilliant presentation of the results. And now we will move on to the section that I'm specifically looking forward to, because it will give you the opportunity to meet the rest of our wonderful partners and friends all around Europe. In 5-minute videos, which we taken to make the program flow smoothly, will present their views and their specifics in their countries. So first, I will introduce the presentation of our Metropolia University in Helsinki partner by Katri Halonen and Nina Torko. Please, let's watch the video.
Hello, it's really nice that you came to share us a little bit of time to learn about the Helsinki case of assets. I think one of the great things we have had working with Nina is that she knows absolutely everybody in the theater scene. So she was able to get us really, really good case study theaters. Would you like to tell them about?
Yes. A few words about our participants in Helsinki. So I tried to find a nice representation of the different performing arts companies. So in the left, we have Zodiac. Zodiac is a center for new dance, and they are doing absolutely brilliant work in performing, doing all sorts of performances, and also they have a amazing audience development program. It's really participatory, and there are lots of people, very like ordinary people, participating in their different courses and projects and so on. Then the second organization that we invited was 𝐴𝐸𝐴, Center for New Circus. In Finland, there are lots of high quality new circus companies. They don't have their own buildings, but 𝐴𝐸𝐴 has offered them a great space to perform and rehearse. Then there is the Finnish National Theatre. Finland used to be a part of Russia, and Finland became independent in 1917. So we have been independent more than 100 years, but this building was actually built before that. An Alexander Theatre. When Finland was part of Russia, the Tsar then sort of had the idea that it would be fantastic to have a theatre in Helsinki as well. And the Alexander Theatre was built, but then the Tsar never actually came. There is still seats there. There's an aisle waiting for him. But as we all know, the history went to other way go. But the Alexander Theatre is a receiving house. So there are lots of different companies coming over and performing there, also from abroad. And the Finnish National Theatre is more performing company, so they are doing their own productions, and they are really a Finnish national theatre. So there is lots of new writing going on, and the newest pieces of Finnish literature and Finnish plays are performed in the Finnish National Theatre.
Yeah. I think one of the findings that I found very typical in Finland is that our age is high. Maybe a little surprise is that it's not so high in other countries that were involved. But in Finland, this goes very well with our typical age group.
When we have taken a look at the national data, many people who visit theatres in Finland have a higher education maybe, and they are very active in working life. It might be that they don't have time when they are working. They don't have so much free time that they could go to theatre so often. So then people are really happy when they retire, and then they have all the extra time, and they can go and visit theatre and go and see many performances in the same week and so on. About the gender, as we can see here in Finland, lots of female participate. In general, in Finnish society, women are really, really active. So I think that might be one explanation for this.
Then another finding we had is the frequency. The Finnish audience is really loyal. They like the theatre they go, and they like to go to the same theatre many times a month or even week.
It seems almost when we take a look at the answers that people gave to our research, that people said that I'm always visiting 𝐴𝐸𝐴, I'm always visiting Alexander Theatre, or I'm always visiting some other organization. So it seems that when people find the arts organization or performing arts venue they really, really love, they tend to come back again and again, and they feel to be kind of a part of the organization.
And then since asset is not just about to learn about the audience, it's also how to use the information so that theaters would get more audience. So we found out the main marketing format. And we come together here that the venue email, venue leaflet, and venue website. So kind of the marketing from the venue covers about 2/3 of the audience or even more. So they are very effective. And I think this goes with the loyalty, that they are very loyal to their theater and they really follow the marketing channels of the theaters. One might say that even the participatory programs, that audience development programs are very wide, and they are also in the Finnish strategy. They are in a national strategy of cultural policy, and also at city level, the Helsinki strategy wants the theaters to make audience development actions and report them to the city. So they are really very essential part of the theater work. So I hope you enjoyed the little clips about Helsinki.
I hope that we see you in Helsinki. Welcome.
So this was a short visit of Helsinki, actually also for the whole asset team, because we mentioned already that of course also the asset project was impacted by the COVID pandemics, and unfortunately also the project meeting in Helsinki had to be cancelled, so just virtually we were able to visit Helsinki. Now we will move to Vienna, to another asset partner, which is 𝐸𝐴-𝐶ultur. And actually Vienna was the first city where we organized the asset workshop for theaters in audience segmentation. So I will give the floor now to Gerald Kröcheling.
Hello from Vienna. My name is Gerald and I'm the coordinator of the Austrian part of asset. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to report to you on the course of the asset project in our country. As you know, Austria, situated in the middle of Europe, is famous for its great cultural offerings. Some numbers: the big state theaters in Vienna and the federal states and other 50 privately organized theaters are visited by 5.5 million people a year. We have the problem that within the national statistics you can't find neither the data of other professional theater work, such as of the autonomous free theater groups, nor of the big amateur theater sector. Vienna, the host city of asset in Austria, is not only a good wine region. It's the capital of Austria and a continuously growing city. It has around 1.9 million inhabitants with 10,000 new citizens every year. 1/3 of the population are foreigners. Only the 7 biggest theater venues in Vienna welcome approximately 1.5 million annual visitors. These numbers don't include the offers of smaller professional theaters, which also have salaried employees and perform all the year. But these theaters were the target group of the asset project in Austria. The Austrian project coordinator of asset is 𝐸𝐴-𝐶ultur, a nationwide umbrella organization and interest group of autonomous cultural organizations. For us, asset opened the window to a level of audience research which these organizations normally cannot afford. For this reason, we decided to invite 4 Vienna theaters which have the focus on realizing contemporary theater work, which are open to experiments and new developments, social-political commitment, and which have a special focus on young audiences. Brut is a production and performance venue for the performative arts in Vienna. It is among the most influential places in the independent performance, dance and theater scene. The Brut program stands for experimentation and interdisciplinarity. 𝐀𝐮 is a theater for children and young adults. It wants to create an authentic and courageous platform for the sights and interests of its young visitors. It is a place where young people are motivated to reflect the society, to speak about wishes, fears and visions. Schubert Theater is a puppet theater for adults with a wide range of themes and artistic expressions. It is bringing classical and contemporary theatrical material on stage. It's touring a lot and cooperating with bigger Austrian institutions as well as young groups of puppet theaters. And Werk X Petersplatz is a contemporary venue realizing innovative theater projects and events with a strong focus on social political relevance. It is well known for its progressive spoken theater performed from young as well as established theater groups. The ASSET project included a preparation seminar of the Audience Agency in Vienna, which was opened also for others. As we were overrun with interested people, we had to organize 3 seminar days instead of 1. The interviews with the audience took place in spring 2019 and 20. In total, nearly 1,500 valid cases were collected. In all 4 theaters, the survey was carried out by staff specifically available for this purpose. As consultations, we had the meetings of the European coordinators, the local meetings in Vienna to prepare and discuss the procedure of the surveys, and the individual meetings of the theaters with the Audience Agency, where the results and the impact on the communication were reflected. Due to the selected theaters, some results were to be expected, for example, a young audience with a great interest in discovery in Vienna. What was more fascinating was to look at the individual segments, how they are distributed, what their preferences are, what information channels and interactions they prefer. We see a great demand for projects like this. All 4 theaters agreed that it was a great opportunity for them to be part of it. The new ways of looking at audiences will be maintained, the results will be implemented. Another means of audience development is the European Theatre Night. In Austria, European Theatre Night began in 2011 with 32 theatres, and now you can find more than 100 organizations offering events. From the beginning it has been supported by the independent scene, but in recent years also state theatres as well as the amateur sector are part of the project. Another study within ASSET concerned it and showed what potential there is in the field of audience retention and acquisition. Further development of Theatre Night could be a future European challenge, maybe also for the ASSET team. Let me say that I'm very grateful to my friends in London, Helsinki, Prague, Sofia and Zagreb for the cooperation of the last years, and I'm sorry that as a matter of the pandemic we only could meet via Zoom in the last years. I missed the direct exchange of ideas with you very, very much. How are we going on with ASSET in Austria? It is clear that the results of the study cannot be directly transferred to other theatres, but it can open the door to a new way of looking at theatre audiences. For this reason, we will present it in the various Austrian regions within the next time. Thank you very much for your attention and best wishes from Austria and from Vienna.
Thanks, Gerald, for the trip to Vienna. And now we will move further south to Croatia, to Zagreb, which is the cradle of the European Theatre Night project. And Sandra Banić-Naumovsky will present her view on ASSET project.
Hello everyone, greetings from Zagreb. My name is Sandra Banić-Naumovsky and I am the coordinator of the implementation of the ASSET project in Zagreb. The city of Zagreb is the capital of the Republic of Croatia and the center of its cultural life. According to the last census, Zagreb has a little more than 800,000 inhabitants. Most of the cultural institutions are located in the center of the city, but for the cultural image of the city, cultural activities in other city districts whose holders are both cultural institutions and the independent cultural scene are also very important. Speaking of the theater scene, Zagreb has 7 public theaters, of which 4 are for adults and 3 for children, rich theatrical activity in cultural centers, and productive and live non-institutional theater scene. Narodno sveučilište Dubrava, the institution where I work, and which is a Croatian partner in the ASET project, operates in the city districts of Gornja and Donja Dubrava. It's a public institution for culture and education. Program activities are organized in 3 organizational units: Gallery 𝗪𝗵𝘁'𝐴, Children's Theatre Dubrava, and Cultural Center. We organize numerous exhibitions, concerts, screen films, produce and perform theatre plays and manifestations, nurture Croatian cultural heritage, design and implement international projects, but the largest capital of our institution is its work with audience of all generations through the implementation of numerous and diverse non-formal educational courses and workshops in culture. The institution is the initiator of the European Theatre Night event, which has been held in the Republic of Croatia since 2008. Numerous theatres were involved in the implementation of the ASET project activities in Zagreb. Workshops on audience research were attended by representatives of 14 cultural organizations from Zagreb, but also other cities in the Republic of Croatia that participate in the Theatre Night event. The research of the theatre audience was conducted in 4 circles. The realization started at the City Drama Theatre Gavella, Zagreb Dance Center, Children's Theatre Dubrava, and Comedy Club Studio 𝐴𝐶𝐻. When choosing partners, it was especially important for us to include large city theatres, theatres in Zagreb suburb, theatres for children, theatres that represent other forms of performing arts, for example, contemporary dance, and the growing sector of stand-up theatres. We conducted mostly paper surveys because at the very first start we find out that our audience is going to need some extra explanations for some questions and that we need to be there with them and for them in this process. During Theatre Night 2019, the pool of theatres where the audience surveys was conducted was significantly expanded. So it was conducted in addition to the aforementioned theatres also in Zagreb Youth Theatre, History and Acting Group, Theatre 𝐀𝐿, Student Theatre Ivan Goran Kovačić, and City Theatre Komedia. In the last cycle of audience surveys, the negative effect of pandemic and earthquake in Zagreb caused changes in the theatres where the research is conducted. Stable partners remained Zagreb Dance Center and Children's Theatre Dubrava, which was joined by one of the newly established private theatre in the city, the Luda Kuća Theatre. The total research was conducted in 10 Zagreb theatres in the period from 16th March 2019 to 21st November 2020, and 1,892 valid surveys were collected. In the last cycle of research, Zagreb theatres were among the few in which audience research with the relevant number of collecting surveys was possible. The analysis of results showed that Zagreb audience considered the theme of play and the performance important for going to the theatre, while the other categories, author's theme, the theatre itself, ticket price, are less dominant. The audience also evaluates the quality of performances and the pleasant experience in theatres as significant. The analysis also showed that Zagreb audience is a loyal audience. The theatre they visit an average of 5 times a year. Also, for the Zagreb audience, important information are those distributed through digital media and channels, especially through the use of social networks and marketing in and around the theatre itself. Also, a significant reason for visiting the theatre are positive word-of-mouth information about performances. At the highest point of the motivation scale of the theatre audiences are the following motives: entertainment, spending time with family and friends, so social reasons, and personal reasons, for example, feeling of belonging to the theatre world. The results of evaluation of the Zagreb audience to the segments defined through the ASET project can be seen in the following image. According to the presented segments, it can be said that the Zagreb audience has less firm preferences related to the theatrical content itself, and that its visit to the theatre is influenced by a number of complex reasons, some of which have been mentioned before. Not as a formal conclusion of the research, but the conclusion of the whole research process within the ASET project, I would state the following. This research provided a valuable insight into possible existing theatre audiences. The research put theatre audiences in Zagreb in relation to those in other European capitals. It helped theaters to get to know their audiences through direct work on filling out surveys and analyzing survey results. This valuable work provided those involved in it with significant insight into the opinions and attitudes of the theater audience, even beyond the research itself. The audience was discussed. Why do they go to the theater more often if they come to the theater with children? To what adult theaters do they go and why? Do they think their opinion is important to theater professionals, etc.? The research also allowed theaters to consider different marketing strategies and methods in relation to the most represented audience segments. The special importance of marketing through social networks has developed a whole range of new ideas, from shaping audience communities to more intensive communication with them through social network profiles. The research also indicated the need for further research. Although this research provided valuable insights and answered some doubts, it also opened a number of new questions and possibilities and showed how audience research can influence the way professionals perceive theater audience. So we look forward to new research. Thank you for your attention.
So this was an insight into the asset project results in Croatia, and our next destination will be Sofia in Bulgaria. Before I give floor to our colleagues from the Art Projects Foundation, I would just like to answer some questions from our conference attendees about the results and the presentations which are part of our conference. All the asset project results will be available in the final publication and on the website assetforart.eu in July when the project comes to its end. And now let's move to Sofia to discuss the asset project results in Bulgarian theaters.
Нощта се роди в една театрална нощ, в която с Мария бяхме част от един друг подобен формат и всъщност се вдъхновихме от това да може да си причиняваме повече театър и реално това даде основата да разучим какъв е този формат и по какъв начин бихме могли да подкрепим театралното изкуство и да покажем всичките му лица. След което, направейки си този ресърч, се свързахме с нашите настоящи партньори от Европейска нощ на театрите, които ни приеха в тяхното семейство. И всъщност това беше старта на нощ на театрите. Така.
Ние толкова много си я харесахме тази мечта за нощта на театрите, че не спряхме докато не я направихме. Първата нощ беше през 2013 само в София. Тогава видяхме как всъщност публиката има нужда от един такъв формат и това беше допълнителна мотивация да продължим и да разширим обхвата, мащаба, градовете, участниците. Видяхме какво правят нашите колеги в Европа, което беше ценно ноу-хау за нас. Смея да твърдя, че всеки път, като започваме да организираме нощта на театрите, го правим се едно за първи път. За толкова емоционално и толкова много адреналин има винаги.
Така и самата публика, която след всяко едно събитие е екзалтирана от това преживяване и от това, че са успели с големи дози да си причинят толкова много театър. Така че да, както каза Мария.
Абсолютно и точно, както Катето каза, публиката се превърна в един много важен фокус за нашата инициатива и съвсем логично, когато дойде предложението да се включим в проекта ASSET, ние не го мислихме много дълго и почти веднага казахме, че се включваме, защото наистина това е проект, който отваря една нова страница и дава съвсем друг прочит, вече доста професионален на това кой ходи на театър, защо ходи на театър, какво очаква, какво получава.
До момента такъв тип проучване не се е случвало в България. Като цяло данните, които съществуват, са доста по-ограничени. и не дават почти никаква информация за самата публика, което беше нещо новаторско, което ние като фундация 𝐼𝐸𝐿 и организатори на Нощ на театрите решихме, че е поредната иновативна стъпка, която искаме да поемем, за да можем да помогнем на театрите, които да разберат малко повече каква е тяхната публика, защо ходи на театър, защо избира конкретни представления. И по този начин това да им даде възможност как да ориентират не само комуникацията си към публиката, не само да привличат и нова публика или да образоват като цяло различните таргет групи, които имат, но и да могат да планират чисто програмните си съдържания.
И за нас като хора, които се занимават в свободното си време с театър и Нощта на театрите, също беше много ценно, понеже ние буквално се срещнахме лице в лице с хората, които ходят на театър. Те ни споделиха дори някои лични неща и видяхме блясъка в очите им и това как те наистина имат нужда от театър и може би театър трябва много бързо да види тези нужди на публиката и да ги превърне в нещо смислено и в нови проекти, в нови театрални постановки.
Реално публиката се състои от 10 сегмента, за които благодарение на този проект ще получим една оформена информация, която ще можем да споделим с всички заинтересовани страни, естествено и с нашите партньори театри, които се включиха в този проект и ни дадоха достъп да направим проучвания на публиката, която ги посещава. Интересен факт е, че в продължение на повече от 2 години реализирахме този проект и това, което той ни даде, както каза Мария, досега с публиката и това да получим информация от първа ръка, което беше много ценно за нас, беше именно и това да разберем всъщност от какво имат нужда и самите театри, така че да могат да използват тази информация по най-адекватен начин.
Да, и всъщност ние сега точно за 9-то издание на Нощта на театрите ще брифираме агенцията точно с тази сегментация, тъй като ние във всяко едно задание за комуникационна кампания на всяка една нощ оформяме такава точка, в която описваме до каква публика трябва да стигнем, така че ето сега конкретно, не само на теория, но и на практика, ние ще приложим това, което проектът ни даде като знание и като информация в един конкретен бриф за 9-та нощ на театрите в България.
Една от основните ни цели е да привличаме нова публика. Смеем да твърдим, че успешно реализираме тази наша цел. Всяка година нощта достига до многообразна публика, до млада публика, до хора, които са в дигиталното пространство и успяваме да ги привлечем. Някои от тях за първи път посещават театър именно в Нощта на театрите и това е нещо ново и ценно, което се надяваме, че благодарение на 𝐻𝐸𝐿 ще може да се превърне в една регулярност и възможност театрите да я използват.
Може би да кажем какво е бъдещето на публиката, на театъра, на Нощта на театрите, вече след като има 𝐻𝐸𝐿 като основа.
Бъдещето надяваме се, предвид и цялата ситуация около пандемията с COVID, която може би ни мотивира да навлезем повече в дигиталните канали, да покажем, че всъщност има 2 начина, в които театъра може да се случва. Единият, разбира се, ще си остане това театърът да се консумира на живо, тъй като наистина това е, може би, най-добрият начин, в който човек може да преживее и съпреживее едно представление. А пък другият е да можеш алтернативно от удобството в къщи и това като плюс, което ти доставя да бъдеш дистанционно, да можеш да се насладиш на театъра, когато нямаш възможност да го направиш физически.
Точно така, всъщност тази пандемия може би ни отвори едни нови възможности, които ние до този момент не искахме да познаем или се страхувахме да вкараме театъра в едно такова дигитално пространство, но всъщност след 8-та нощ на театрите видяхме, че двете неща не си противоречат, напротив, допълват се. И може би натам трябва да тръгне и нашия формат, и нашата инициатива, и въобще театъра, за да разшири своя обхват и да стигне до нови хора.
Well, fears around digital shift of theater and live arts are present everywhere, and I would like to thank to our Bulgarian colleagues to mention this issue, because probably we will get back to this topic also tomorrow in our discussions about the impact of the ESSET project with involved theaters, and then in the final session of our conference, which will be dedicated to the future of the European Theatre Night. But now let's finish our journey across Europe in Prague. And I give the floor to Michal Lazňovský from the Arts Management Department of the Theatre Faculty Academy of Performing Arts in Prague to present his view on ESSET project results.
Hello, my name is Michal Lazňovský. As a head of Department of Arts Management of the Theatre Faculty, I represent the Academy of Performing Arts in Prague. Please let me shortly introduce the starting points, background and findings of Czech part of the research carried out within ESSET project activities. First, please let me point out some statistical data. The Czech Republic is inhabited by slightly over 10 million citizens, while about 1.3 million of them live in the capital of Prague. Proportions are considerably different when it comes to the data on theatres. It is important to say that the concept of theatre in our case includes drama, opera, music theatres, puppet theatres, dance and circus and so on. With just a little bit over 10% of the population in Prague, just a bit less than half of the theatres is based here. Also, almost half of the shows are presented in the capital, and almost half of the annual turnover in theatre industry is spent here too. And even more than half of the audiences choose one of about 115 theatres in Prague to visit a performance. That makes Prague positively a dominant centre of cultural life in the Czech Republic. It's up to you to consider it a unique characteristic of our capital or a sign of an inequality of the cultural service distribution. To cover the extremely rich theatre sector in Prague, we've decided to approach 4 theatres with different background, each of them representing different business models occurring in the Czech Republic. The National Theatre is the flagship of the Czech theatre industry and the only theatre established by the state. The city of Prague, on the other hand, had established 10 municipal theatres, and Švandovo divadlo represent this substantial segment in our set of theatres. As previous to our public institutions, we choose the other 2 from the private entities, which constitute the rest of the sector. While 𝐀𝐻𝐾 78 is one of the most prominent of the non-profit companies, the Studio 2 Theatre has the same position among entrepreneurial ones. All of the theatres accepted the offer to collaborate with our project without hesitation, and we're grateful for that, and thanks to their representative probably sitting in the audience. For me, this proves that arts organizations are ready to take the effort to find out more about their audiences, and that's just what ESSET project is all about. After analyzing almost 3,300 surveys gathered in Prague's theatres, we found some interesting facts. In terms of a plain demography, it was a surprise to me that the visitors are distributed in all age groups pretty equally, which is not the case in all countries. It's good news, namely in the case of young generation attendees, although we did not include kids younger than 16 years in the research. It also turned out that more than in other countries, audience members much more usually travel to Prague to visit the theatre. That corresponds to the importance of Prague as cultural center of the Czech Republic, which I demonstrated in the beginning. But it's not only a case of the National Theatre, where one could expect that, but also of other theatres, significantly of the Studio 2 Theatre, with about 25% of non-residents in the audience. In the research, we also concentrated on the behavior of the audience in terms of gaining information about the theatre and shows, which is pretty important for the effectivity of marketing costs. The behavior varies in each country and theatre. Just like the fact that maybe in our case, if you allow me to exaggerate a bit, they don't have to bother that much, as Czech audiences is far most likely to just take their chances. Surprisingly for me, the Prague theatregoers declare by far more often, compared to other cities, that their most important motivation to visit theatres is to spend the time with friends and families. With a social aspect this strong, I consider this is an important starting point for audience development activities of our theatres. The financial managers, on the other hand, might want to know that compared to other countries, in Czech case, the ticket price was the least important decision-making factor. There's much more to be found in the final asset book to be published in a couple of months. In the publication as well as later on during this conference, you will also get to know about the audience preferences and device audience segments and how they differ country to country. Thanks a lot for your attention and enjoy the conference. Well, now you've heard from all our partner countries about their approach to the asset project and the other aspects of it. And as Theatre Night is an important phenomenon in our project, as you've understood so far, now we have also included the Theatre Night audience in the research. And the results and facts about this will be presented by nobody else than Martina as a coordinator of the Czech Theatre Night with the help of Jonathan, I believe.
Thank you, Michal. Well, let's talk a while about Czech Theatre Night, and then later on we will reveal some of the results about European Theatre Night audiences. Czech Theatre Night is organized by the Arts and Theatre Institute, which is a governmental organization established by Ministry of Culture Czech Republic, and it provides a lot of services around Czech theatre, but also other arts such as literature, music, dance, and visual arts. Main aims of the Theatre Night in Czech Republic are not only related to audience development, but also to increase social value and prestige of theatre and performing arts, and last but not least, also to support international cooperation within the European Theatre Night. The Arts and Theatre Institute provides a lot of coordination and organization and communication activities around the Theatre Night, which is a huge event in our country. Here you can see some photos to feel a little bit the atmosphere of the whole event. But let's get back to the numbers and let's check what is the Theatre Night in the Czech Republic when we talk about its extent and fact and figures. Here you can see the development of number of organizations participating in the Theatre Night in Czech Republic in the editions 2013 to 2019. The year 2013 was the first edition of the Theatre Night in our country, and I included 2019 as the last one, although of course we had also a Theatre Night last year, but under the COVID pandemic restrictions it happened mainly digitally, and it was really a special edition and year of the event. The Theatre Night in Czech Republic is mainly organized by independent organizations, and the majority are non-profit, non-governmental organizations such as registered associations or registered institutes. You see that the core of Theatre Night organizers in our country is stable. a huge part of all organizers who took part in Theatre Night in Czech Republic are those organizations who organized this event 4 and more times. So they participated in 4, 5, 6, or 7 editions. And when we talk about the event from the point of view of inclusion of regions and the capital city of Prague, we can see an interesting development. The Theatre Night started as predominantly event organized by many subjects in the capital city of Prague, 55% in 2013. But then it slowly expanded more to the regions. So the 2019 edition was 46% organized in Prague, and the rest was organized in the regions. But we should get back to the audience, as I promised. So what do we know about the theater Theatre Night audience? We conducted some surveys already before the asset project because we wanted to know if the Theatre Night meets the expectations of its audiences. And here you can see audience by age group in 2013, 2014, and 2015. You can see that the core of audiences are young people or middle-aged generation from 15 to 49 years old, but there is a slight increase of older audiences over 50 years in this period. Also, there is a slight increase of participation of men if we look into the gender percentage of Theatre Night audiences. As I said, we conducted theater audience research in 2013 and 14. This research was only related to Theatre Night audiences. And in 2015 and 16, with the help of NMS Market Research Agency, we conducted a research which tried to compare Theatre Night audiences with audiences for conventional theatre programming. The main findings from all these research and surveys are displayed on this slide. The main finding, and we were very happy about this finding, is that really this event meets the expectation of the audiences. 75% visitors were happy about the event in 2013, and later on even 90% of all spectators. The preferred programs are really related mainly with the Theatre Night program, which are guided tours, extracts from productions, meeting with artists. So it means all these special programs prepared for the Theatre Night, especially by all the theaters and culture organizations, are much appreciated by the audience. 16% of visitors attended Theatre Night with children. This relates a little bit what Michal mentioned in the asset results presentation, that Czech audiences are motivated to attend theatre with friends and family. The Theatre Night audiences also is a little bit more mainstream compared to the regular audience of regular performances. What is the motivation to visit Theatre Night? I mentioned already that the main motivation is the idea of Theatre Night itself, a rare and exceptional theatrical event. So the most expected programs are accompanying programs, and popularity of the given theater or low cost of free admission to Theatre Night is less important of Theatre Night audiences in the Czech Republic. Theatre Night is better at targeting new visitors who are more willing to come to the theatre again than they are after watching a conventional performance this is the main finding probably also for the theater night, and its reason to be organized also in the upcoming years, because this is the main audience development finding from our surveys. And what is also interesting related to mobility of audience, theater night visitors are more connected to events in their place of residence, so they prefer to visit really local events in the place of their residence. If you want to find out more about the theater night in Czech Republic, you can check a brand new book which was published by the Arts and Theatre Institute called Theatre Day and Night, a look back at 7 years of theater night in the Czech Republic, where we present not only the results of our surveys, but also profiles of the theaters involved in theater night in the Czech Republic. And besides of the 4 asset theaters, so theaters where data was collected within the asset projects, which is 𝐀𝐮𝐝𝐻 Divadlo, National Theatre, 𝐀𝐞𝐏 78 and Studio 2 Theatre, you can find another 80 theaters which share their activities and inspiring work within the theater night project in the past 7 years. We were also in the asset project, of course, we were very much interested how the European theater night audience looks like. And I would like to ask Jonathan to come back again to our broadcasting and to share with us the results from the European Theatre Night survey conducted within the asset project.
Okay, so just to show you some of the research. This is the research across the 4 cities that were involved in European theatre. There are 2 sets of results I'm just going to show you here very briefly. The first is from the research we did in the first phase I showed, like from spring 2019. And in that first phase of questionnaires, we asked people whether or not they'd been to the European Theatre Night. So these were the regular attenders in those places. And there was a variety of different responses. I think we can see here that in Croatia, there was 42% of those who were attending during the spring 2019 had been to a theatre night previously. At the other end of the scale, we have Austria, where 8% have been to European Theatre Night. It kind of, if you think about what I was showing earlier in terms of how many are frequent, regular, and how many are first-time attenders, that might explain that a little bit. Because in Austria, we remember there were more in the research. There were more people who were kind of one-time, first-off attenders. So. You know, for sure. It's known about in some parts of the audience. What we asked about was really a key question is what is the point of European Theatre Night? What does it do? And different people have different ideas of what it is. There are usually broad, let's call them broadly, audience development aims, and in that first phase, what we looked at is what the people responded to felt were the most important things in terms of theatre night. And quite a lot of people felt this middle one, which I'll show you in some other data on this in a moment. Try visiting theatres you haven't been to before. I think it's fair to say that in general, from the research we've done in the European Theatre Night, it didn't necessarily bring very many people who were completely new to theatre. I think we can be clear about that. What it did bring was people who occasionally went to theatre and wanted to try out something new, and usually very often to try out theatres they haven't been to before. So then in November 2019, what we did was we did research actually of people attending European Theatre Night in November 2019 in those 4 countries. We actually, even though it was a one-day event in most of those places, in fact, not just one day, one night, we actually did pretty well at getting some responses from people to understand what they thought about European Theatre Night, why they were there, and what was important about it. So let's have a quick look at a couple of important slides here. European Theatre Night was good at encouraging people to attend many of the participating theatres for the first time, but they weren't completely new to theatre. That is that it encouraged people to try something out. They were fairly either regular or occasional attenders of theatre, but what it did was it encouraged very often people to go to a different venue. 23% of people say it was the first time they'd been to that venue. And you can see only 1% said it was the first time they'd been to any theatre. So, I mean, that's quite a stark statement. You know, most people who go to the theatre, who might go to the theatre, are likely to have been before. But you see there, that's important. So why did they attend? Why did they participate? We asked them a variety of things which they could choose, and they could choose as many as they wanted. This was not a one only. And top of the list, special activities. This comes through very clearly in discussion with some of the venues and in the project. That, for example, I mean, it's been really interesting talking to the venues in Bulgaria, the Sofia venues, about what they do, whereby they very often bring theatres together, do special events. There's one event I remember as being especially nice, which is where a whole performance went from one theatre to another, so you actually tracked it going from different places. Enjoy the atmosphere, very high, so people just want to be there. Theatre Night is a big event, of course, it is a big event. It should be even bigger, I think. Find out more about theatre in general. They're the top 4. Then we look down at been to a Theatre Night event before. It's a good opportunity to visit a theatre I haven't been to before. That's that point I mentioned before, that there's an idea of like try something out. It's a chance to try a different venue. Interestingly, tickets are free or cheaper than usual. Not a massive motivator, not a massive reason. Most of the people involved in the European Theatre Night, certainly I know in Austria, that's very much the idea. They are either cheap or free to go. And then we get down to some of those more regular attenders. There are some very theatre people just want to go to things a lot and try out different performances. I think that there's a real opportunity in the European Theatre Night work to do more, and tomorrow we will have a whole session on looking at how European Theatre Night might be taken forward. If we look, for example, at things like the Museums at Night project, the museum sector has really done a lot to have specific days, particular initiatives that are launched that are done Europe-wide to encourage people to go. It's not everyone agrees about this. Some people think it's a gimmick and not important, but I think there's actually something to be said about focusing attention on a day which might be about, hey, let's go and see our local theatre, let's go to a theatre, let's try out theatre on this one night and share this with other people internationally.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for this explanation. We can continue the discussion about the European Theatre Night tomorrow. You are very welcome also to the final session of the conference. And I give the floor back to Michal, who will announce maybe some small changes.
Yes, dear audience, we're very sorry to be a little bit late on schedule, thanks to very interesting presentations. At least I hope you find them interesting too. We will make the break much shorter, and still we will be starting the panel discussion, which follows a bit later. So we hope that we will have you back in 4 minutes, and it will be 10 before 4 when we start the discussion with our wonderful panelists. Thank you for your attention. The audience, welcome back. Now we have the last part of the conference today ahead of us. It will be a panel discussion with some wonderful guests. I hope I can welcome in the virtual space for the debate. We will start with the presentations and position statements of the four panelists, who are 𝐀𝐮𝐝𝐢𝐞𝐬𝐿, the Director of the Department of Culture and Tourism of City of Prague, 𝗪𝗫𝑝𝘁'𝘀, the Director of Cultural Policy Research Center 𝐾UPORE, Wolfgang Graf, an entrepreneur and the founder of Kulturplaner, and Darko Lukic, the researcher, professor and expert in ECO capacity building expert team. First, I will give the floor to 𝐀𝐮𝐝𝐢𝐞𝐬𝐿, who is experienced culture manager, now working for City of Prague as a director of the Department of Culture and Tourism. Before he worked as a program director of the European Capital of Culture in Pilsen 2015, and also in different cultural events and venues. The Street for Art Festival is a groundbreaking festival of the public art, and is still something we all remember from from the years when we were much younger. He is also teaching at the Arts Department of Theatre Faculty of the Academy of Performing Arts. He is my colleague. So please, 𝐀𝐮, if I may ask, the floor is yours for your 5 minutes position statement.
Thank you, Michal. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to listen to the outcomes of the ASSET project. I am proud of it as a member of the theatre faculty, and I'm also happy that I could probably use the results of the project when planning the cultural policy of the City of Prague. I didn't bring actually my presentation because as I saw the results of ASSET project, I actually think that our small survey would only confirm the findings, the basic findings you have brought in, especially in terms of the motivations of the audiences and the frequency of audiences coming to the theaters. What is probably special about Prague audiences is really what also Michal mentioned, that the theaters in Prague are welcoming quite a big portion of visitors and audiences who are not resident in Prague. It's more than a third of the audiences that are coming from the central Bohemia region or further away. I was always interested in audiences, and I'm even more interested now, so I'll be really keen listening to your points and your implications that you draw from this project and your own researches of audiences, because I feel that the cultural policies actually mostly support with the public subsidies and public money the supply side of the cultural production with the own organizations run by the city or state or with the grant schemes. But what I would really love to draw from this experience, from the ASSET project, is actually to find out how the demand side or the audience part could be supported and provided with the measures of cultural policy. What was quite revealing for me or striking was when Jonathan presented the general findings. Actually, the comparison of the audiences of Prague and Vienna, where it was really obvious that Viennese audiences are much more open. There is much more much bigger proportion of the explorers in the audience, a little bit less of the mainstreamers. Whereas in Prague, I can see the mainstreamers are and star lovers are the bigger portion of the audiences. And I would really like to find out more, and maybe you know why, or you have your own conclusions, why this is happening. Whether if theater is really much more embedded in the society, daily debate, or whether there is much more media coverage about theater openings, or whether it's because of the educational setup. So this would be really an interesting debate for me, how actually the cultural policy and the educational policy could really influence the audience motivations, remove the barriers, and really support the demand side of the cultural consumption. So just to make a basic comparison, Prague is running, the city of Prague is running 10 theaters by itself. Prague runs mostly drama-oriented theaters, one musical theater, and 2 theaters focused on the children program, with the overall budget of 20 million euros. And the grant scheme for the theaters only is about 5 million euros per year. So these are the basic support measures for the theater, cultural life, and cultural policy in Prague. It's similar with Vienna. There is about 1.5 million tickets sold for the theater events during a year in Prague. So as I said, I'm interested in the very practical use of your findings in terms of setting up a new cultural policy, which Prague is now developing. And that's about it. I'm interested in my colleagues' speeches. Thanks for the opportunity.
𝐪𝐵𝐿, who is the director of the Center of Cultural Policy Research 𝐀𝐮𝐝 in the Foundation of Cultural Policy Research since 2016. Mario is also an active decision maker in the field of cultural policy research and education. She is former director of Division of Art Policy in Ministry of Education and Culture and former director of Arts Promotion Center. She has been professor of media management in Aalto University School of Arts, Design and Architecture, dean of the Department of Arts and Media, publisher and multimedia producer. She has been working as a consultant and trainer for digital media projects, as well in governmental and as private sector. Dear Mrs. 𝐀𝐻, please can I ask you to have your position?
Hello, good evening, and thank you for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me. It's really interesting to hear results and see the results of your research project, and very keen on getting the final results also. As I see, you have a really interesting comparison between the European cities of the users and visitors in the cultural venues. I can see that I'm myself in just according to the Finnish partner research results, I'm on the curve of the heavy users of the culture. These 60-year-old civilized ladies hanging in their theaters and orchestras. So this is, I think it's exactly the scene here. 𝐀𝐻, our research center for cultural policies, is 20-year-old, and I've been leading or directing it for 6.5 years, and it's been really interesting. We are using a lot of questionnaires and collecting. We are collecting data. We're doing research for the help of the ministries and the municipalities and cities, governmental level, and also in a local level for decision makers to make better cultural policy and make legislation and decisions. And this I saw from your results that we are almost collecting the same type of data through different types of questionnaires, and it's I think it's very important to know how we what the comparison of the use of the data and how we analyze it, and I think that especially after this COVID pandemic, when the theaters, orchestras, every cultural venues has been closed over 1.5 years. It's been a very, very heavy time, especially for cultural workers and freelancers. I think we don't have to motivate people a lot when the theaters opens, but what has been very, very important with cities and municipalities when we have been seeking the data about the visitors is that they really want to know something about the non-goers, those non-visitors, those who don't go to the culture, and it's a very, very, it's also a kind of a political question, because these non-goers, those who don't go to the theater, never, or don't use libraries, it shows that they are the same group of people who don't vote, who don't participate in any cultural activities, or if they do, they seem to be, at least in some profile analysis shows that they seem to be the same group that the populist political movement attenders. I don't have I sent my presentation to but I can show something. I don't usually use this Skype, but how can? Okay, I continue. If you have my presentation there, you can, if you can help me to share it. Actually, in my presentation, I have the same type of analysis that you have had, as I saw in your project. We are using the data from Statistics Finland, or we are something collecting by ourselves, and it would be really interesting to hear also the ideas and experiences of colleagues, how you user analyze these data. I think I've used my 5 minutes of time of the presentation. So hopefully we continue on.
Back to you, Mikhail, I think.
Behind me probably is on, so if you want to more comment on that, you can. The visitors can see your presentation, but then we can move further on and get back to it.
Okay,
So now,
I can see the slide about the library visitors in public libraries, and the interesting thing here is that this digital or virtual visits to library has grown and on so that they became more popular. Of course, this year it's difficult because also libraries has been closed some time. But I can come back to my slides maybe later if there is time.
okay, fine.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Mario. And now I will ask Mr. Graf to take the floor. Wolfgang Graf is an entrepreneur with focus on digital audience development tools for cultural institutions. It is their mission to use technology and audience data to enable cultural institutions to better connect with their existing and new audiences in order to increase their artistic financial freedom. So please, Wolfgang, if I may ask, and give you the floor now.
Thanks, Michael, and hello everybody. Hello from Vienna. I'll try to share the screen. Let's see if it works. With Skype, you never know, some surprises. But Michael might tell me if it's working.
Yeah, I think you're on. It's okay.
I'm on? Okay,
yeah.
I don't see it, but if you say I'm on, it's good. So basically, I think my part here in the presentation is a little bit to discuss about digital and data-driven audience segmentation. So it's fantastic, great to hear about all the surveys and all the data we've seen so far. We are more focused on the kind of automated and machine learning-driven audience segmentation. That's what we've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years. With several different companies, started with data analytics, then going over to a kind of booking.com of event ticketing, but also in the last few months of the pandemic, we also helped many cultural institutions to connect to their audiences, like with streaming. So most of them have been streaming on YouTube. But as you know, with YouTube, you don't have any customer data. The only one who wins is YouTube and Google. So if you want to reach out to your audience, they like your program, they like your content, and you want to reach out to them, you have to pay to Google. And this is something we want to help you, and we want to enable all cultural institutions to own their data, grow their fan base, and have the tools to communicate them in a kind of 360-degree communication channel and reach out to them and develop them. And why we're doing all this, well, some references, you get the sheets later on, like I'm talking about mainly about the German-speaking markets here. We worked with Vienna State Opera, with Salzburg Festival, with Opera Cologne, with Opernhaus Zürich, but also some in France, Philharmonie de Paris. You get the slides later on anyway. But why are we doing all that? I think we want to help cultural institutions to survive, and we want to help that this great variety of cultural offerings still exists in 15 years, and this only exists if people go to the theaters. And like Maya, what you said before, it's also about the non-goers. We all here live in our bubble. We all love culture. We all like theaters. We go there many, many times. But this is not the channel. This is not the society. This is part of the society. And we work also a lot with young audiences. And if you ask young audiences, maybe they know Mozart, but with Tchaikovsky, it's already really difficult. And if you get to Donizetti, they have no idea who that guy is. And if there is a musician or whatever, maybe it's a pop star, they've seen it on TikTok, they have no idea. And I think data can help us. And if we like it or not, we are in this global entertainment competition. It's scarce resources of budget, financial budget, but also of leisure time activities. And there's so many activities available, and everything is just a fingertip away. So I think we, and in the cultural sector, I think we're catching up, but compared to other entertainment companies, if you take Netflix, for instance, we are still somehow in the stone age of digitalization. So I think the whole pandemic, if many bad things, but at least it has a disruptive force, and it was pushing everyone to catch up on the digitalization. And I think this is here, and it's gonna stay, and we're gonna have to deal with it, and we have to figure out how we're gonna use it and make digitalization as our friend, and find new formats as a kind of appetizer, new digital formats as a kind of appetizer to bring people back in the theaters. And the good news about it, we learn a lot about the audiences. We get so many data points, and it helps us to personalize our offers. But the difficulty, if I talk about database audience segmentation, is that compared to other industry, the offer can't be standardized. This is good, we love it. If you take, for instance, but from a data point of view, it makes it really difficult. If you take the Magic Flute for Mozart, for instance, Magic Flute, Mozart, in Vienna, in the Vienna State Opera, from a data point of view, it's completely the same thing. But if 𝐀𝐮𝐴𝐿 is the director, it's completely different if 𝗪𝗵𝘁'𝑚 does it. So it attracts a completely different audience. And so what you said before, what the outcome of the study with the star lovers and these are kind of things, we see it too, because people want to get anchor points. If they see the Agatha Christie play is selling very well in the 𝐷𝐸𝐻𝑡, because people, they think, Agatha Christie, I know about it, so they go there. But the good news about everything we're doing, we have more and more data. Like, even if it's getting harder with the websites to track and learn about customer behavior with mobile apps, but especially also with streaming, audio and video streaming, this is very helpful. So we partnered up just a few months ago with 𝗪𝗏𝑡𝗏, which is a classical Spotify of classical music, so a streaming service dedicated to classical music. And we did it for one specific reason. If one goes to a concert hall, let's say 3 times a year, you hardly have any data. But if this person listens to playlists, you learn a lot about tastes and things he or she likes. So I think while we're doing all that, we want to learn about our audience, and we want to know what they like, and we want to be able to make a very personalized and tailor-made offer, delivered on the right place at the right time and at the right place. And I think this could be very helpful. And the good news is we don't start at zero. We've got many data. We've got the surveys, we've got the ticketing purchase data, we've got the email, social media data, the website, app behavior, streaming data. We just need to bring it together. And that's what we're kind of doing through many interfaces, to have one single size of truth, have all the data and learn from the data, also with machine learning and algorithm. And I brought you a few examples how technology and data could help us and what we've been doing, and then I'm looking forward to the discussion. So in addition to what we've seen about the segmentation, and as said in the study, you have plenty of options how to do segmentation, so many opportunities, various methodologies. And I brought you one thing, this is very important if you look, especially now after the corona crisis is over and theater is open again, it's the recency frequency metrics. Actually, you look at it, who is your champion, who is a loyalist, but also who in your database and who's a sleeper, who hasn't bought a ticket and hasn't been to your theater for quite a while, and who needs attention because you might lose him. And then we did kind of an analysis, this is all kind of cohort and algorithm based, that you see how this is developing year over year. And if the things, the communication means and things, everything you're trying to reach out to them, if it's working or not, one thing. Second thing, and we show that it works. We've made with one of our clients, they made a very personalized mailings, just 2,500 emails, open rate 50%, but the really important thing, they sold over 600 tickets within a few days and made a turnover of about 20K. this within 10 days from this email. So, and this is only if it, and this was completely better than any emails before, because it's been taste and behavior based and very personalized. Other thing is also on the data, you can make special offers. This is for you. But also one thing, we were integrating these audio samples. And as I mentioned before, 𝐀𝐮𝐝𝐻 with Vienna State Opera, we had young audience tickets, wasn't selling very well. People had no idea who 𝐀𝐮𝐝𝐻 is. Then we put in audio samples for Don Pasquale, and then it was selling like hell. And the feedback was from young people, this is easy listening music. This is going to be a fun evening. I'm going to buy a ticket. But they had no idea about before, and they didn't buy it. We also, last example on this, on the streaming thing, video streaming, it helps you. And this is about participation. Theaters are in the cities. What about the rural areas? What about elderly people who can't move that easily? So I think have been liked to go to the theater but can't anymore. So I think streaming is an opportunity to also connect to these audiences. And this is an example from Germany, where about 81% of the people buying a ticket, it's been pay as you wish, so it's been for free as well, but they need to leave their email addresses so that we can match it with the database, have not been registered in their email database, have not been registered in the ticketing database. So this is a very high percentage. If we look at the data from the United States, it's about 40% are the loyalists, so subscribers and people coming 3 or 4 times a year. But even in the United States, the data we have, 40% are people who have never been to the theaters before. And you see it on the map. Germany is in the middle with the dark red one, but all the others, you might to spread the word and reach out to new audiences. So looking forward to all your thoughts on hybrid season and new formats like espresso concerts, pop-up formats. I think people be sitting in an opera for 4 hours. Not sure how it's going to be a certain audience, but in order we need to have more appetizers to lower the barriers. And what I would also be interesting, what I've seen here in the study, that we bring all this data together. I think the audience agency did it in the UK, have a kind of benchmarking, but also see in a city-based, what's the cultural wallet? You know, where do people go and how could we work together? We need to work together and cooperate on the city level, but even on a European level, and challenge Netflix and co and make sure theaters and people love the theaters as much as we do and go there even in 20 or more years. Thank you.
A lot of fuel to our future discussion. I hope we will have some time for it because we're a little bit late. I apologize again to you panelists and the audience, of course. But now I will give floor to Mrs. Darko Lukic, who's the academic, researcher, trainer, teacher, consultant, and practitioner from Croatia, now living in Germany, if I'm right, and working around Europe. He is an expert in pool of multidisciplinary experts in the capacity building of European capitals of culture, the EIDL, European Association for Local Development based in Brussels. His professional experience includes positions of artistic director of drama theaters like National Theatre in Sarajevo, artistic director of manager of Theatre and 𝐻𝐻 in Zagreb, positions of Vice Dean and Deputy Dean of Academy of Drama Arts at the University of Zagreb, and member of various boards of the cultural institutions in the field of drama, theatre, audience development, and international collaboration. Dear Mr. Lukic, we're happy to have you here. I believe you will use a presentation, so please put it on if you wish, and the floor is yours.
So thank you, Michal. Thank you very much for that kind introduction and also the invitation for participating in this panel. I sent you 2 days before my PowerPoint, so if you can do it, please, I will be happy if you do it. Okay. But anyway, I understood that the participants will get later the whole
Yes,
PowerPoint,
the participant will get your presentation and we will ask the technical crew to put it on now.
Yeah, I don't need it right now. So we already heard some part of a situation in Croatia, thanks to Jonathan, who is very familiar with the situation in Croatia. And the reason I'm here today is that I'm really privileged to share with you completely new and still unpublished results of the research. It is a very huge research called Analytical Report on Croatian Cultural Policy. This is a document produced in 3 years research as a base for the National Strategic Plan of Croatian Culture 2020-2030. So in that research, I was responsible for the chapter called Drama, Opera and Ballet Theatre, in all the aspects of that performing arts fields, financial, legal, organizational, demographical, and of course the audience. So what I can share about that Croatian situation, according to insight in that research, is that the problem of use of the data is recognized and addressed. Some of the issues are addressed through the focused activities, and some that activities are ongoing, but the general situation in the field is far from satisfactory. There is a lack of the researches, I mean scientific, serious researches. The researches we can use are particular and individually commissioned by different theaters or theater festivals. That means that we deal with partial statistics, and it's still not non-significant in decision-making and policy creating process. So that was my advice to the Ministry of Culture after that research, to focus on that issues. Segmentation methodology used usually before used basic forms like demographic, geographic, and volume. And thanks to last 4 years, thanks to implementation of ADESTE Plus European program in audience development, the methods and experiences are much more focused on the psychographic methodology, on benefits, and subgroup segmentation. Jonathan knows perfectly well what I'm talking about because he participated in the first steps in Croatia establishing that program. As for cultural strategies, which are addressed to the audience situation, it's not yet a complete strategical approach. It is yet to be done to make a strategical approach to the audience issues. But some focused activities are very helpful. Since 2017, Ministry of Culture is giving the special grants, especially for the audience development programs in various fields of cultural production. Then audience development researches are conducted through the education process, mostly through the program Creative Europe 2014-2020, several of them, and also capacity building through the webinars, workshops, and lecturing organized by Ministry of Culture, Foundation Kultura Nova, and some municipalities also happened in the last 3 or 4 years. So in the situation analysis, for the end of my short presentations, we collected data from 177 professional theaters in Croatia. Among them, the 30 were for theaters for children and youth, and among that, 11 were the puppet theaters. We also collected data from the 52 theaters, community amateur theaters. Among the professional theaters, we have in Croatia a special situation due to historical reasons. We have 5 national theaters. And 4 of them had full capacity drama, opera, and ballet ensembles. For such a small country, it's ridiculous, but it's really for the last 300 years historical reasons. They have a status of national theaters. And also we researched 199 independent and private theater groups and theater festivals and theater organizations. So what the research showed, the total prevalence of adults, like 68.49% of adults in the audience, and lack of children and youth audience participation, only 25.83%. very unsatisfactory small participation of the audience of amateur performances, just 5.68%. And concerning that they are sometimes the only performing theater in the rural area, this is really problem. Total number of Croatian theater audience in season 2016-2017 was 2,224,617 spectators. If we know that in Croatia we have 4,076,000 citizens, it seems like more than half of them are participating. But unfortunately, the real situation on the field is far away from that. So the structure of audience showed significant imbalance between rural and urban areas, especially in number of events offered, in the number of attendance of attendees, quality of the events offered to the audience, and audience participation in total. So the solutions I propose to be implemented in these situations is to focus on special events like educational and capacity building programs, especially in local community in rural areas. Then additional educational programs such through the Adeste Plus program is already going on. Capacity buildings include institutional support, I mean financial, organizational, educational, technical, technological, but also informal ways of sharing information and informal ways of capacity building to address the problems. So for the beginning, that will be that. We also freshly made the study, the research of impact of COVID pandemic on the cultural institution, which I would love to share later in case that there is interest for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Darko. I hope we will get to the topic which has been already raised by Wolfgang, and that is probably pretty actual for all of us, and we should not avoid that. This is the panel on evidence-based cultural policy making. So we will now in the discussion explore what's the data that we miss on the audience, what the practical use of it, namely in terms of cultural policy, and how to enhance the cultural policy making process. With me, the co-moderator of the panel will be Jonathan Gudecker, my colleague. I hope we can hear you. And if you want to react on some of the positions we had, please feel free to enter. This will be a little bit more tricky due to this sudden change, because my colleague Martina has had to apologize from this part of the conference. So please, Jonathan, step in anytime if you wish. We are not in the direct connection, but the floor is yours.
I see myself behind you now, rather bizarrely.
Are you there? No.
Yeah.
It's somehow doubled.
Yeah. Can I also say something, actually, because I think those were all really fascinating contributions, and one of the things I think that I'll be interested to ask the panelists about is that, like as Mario was saying, very often there are people say they're interested in non-attenders, and there's kind of some research done into it, and people go, oh, it's this person or that person, and then you think, great, so what's the policy implication for this? And I think that one of the interesting things, and like to go to what Darko is saying about Croatia, as a result of this research, this interesting research you're doing, you know, will anything change? That's kind of the, you know, as a result of knowing this stuff. And I think that's an interesting question. And Yuri mentioned as well about the fact that policy tends to be based in many places around a supply side of thing, like what is it, you know, and we're all in the theatre world, we're linked into these theatre buildings that have existed sometimes for centuries, very beautiful often, but you know, how does that relate to what's actually needed in the population? And I also loved Wolfgang's thing, which is around that wider implication, which does take us away from theatre buildings, for example. So maybe if we get a chance, I have to say something about the research we've done around audiences since the COVID pandemic has come along. But I wonder if there's, I think it would be interesting to see what people's thoughts are about the connection between the evidence or research and whether it really changes or should do or can change real policy.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I also would like to hear from our panelists their points on that. There was a question raised by 𝐸𝐿 how the cultural education and educational policy can really influence the demand of the audiences. In reality, does the data we get and we collect and we get better in collecting it, does it really change things? Maybe whoever wants to take the floor. Mrs. 𝐀𝐿𝐵𝑒𝐿, pardon, sorry.
You're on mute, as far as I can tell.
Right now you can hear me. Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Wolfgang was saying that about the bubble that we are living in, and thinking that this is the data that we need to do studies. It's I don't know. I would like to hear about from the others. Have you managed to reach the non-goers or those who don't consume or use cultural services? But I can say we have done some research also about the accessibility issues and studied how difficult or impossible or possible is for disabled people or foreign-born citizens or elderly people visit some cultural venues, and these studies has been more or less influential, so that how to say the ministry and the stakeholders for cultural policy has made some decisions and some improvements and some legislation and regulations how the cultural venues should look like or be like, so that they are accessible for all kinds of users and visitors, and also it affects the pricing policy as well in some places. But
I'm afraid we lost your voice in the moment. So I will ask the other panelists to take the opportunity to react. How about the accessibility of the arts? How the data we have help us take measures to make the arts more accessible and democratic. Mr. 𝐀𝐿𝐵𝑒𝐿, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Just I think Jonathan asked a very important question. Is anything going to be changed? Is anything going to happen after we did all the analysis? I believe that in this particular strategical document for 2020-2030, the special chapter of audience development would be addressed. But is anything really going to happen on the field? I think it's highly dependent of the flexibility of organizations and institutions itself. According to my experience right now, I'm conducting like workshops with in audience development for the independent small organizations, independent theater, small organization festival, and it's going since now, like I would say, really 70% easier and more quick than my previous education I had in national theaters in institutional organizations, which are huge, conservative, stable, hierarchically organized, unflexible for the changes. So according to that experience, I think it's highly dependent of the local communities and local cultural policy makers and decision makers to adapt to the new situation, especially in post-COVID situation, which will be terribly, terribly difficult, and to make necessary changes in their organizational philosophy, in their organizational policy to implement the needs and measures from the audience development, which we know that they exist according to data we collected.
You raise your arm. The floor is yours. 𝐀𝐮𝐼, the floor is yours. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, thank you. Just before Wolfgang, I wanted to actually remark on what Wolfgang said in his previous entry about the interesting hybridization of the data entries, which I really think that is something of a future that the cultural institutions should take on. I've seen such a growth of numbers of online audiences in our theaters. I've seen so many innovations that the theaters have brought in terms of making podcasts and making online streamings, and we already tried also the 360 videos of theater shows with new services that are born here, and not in this amount as Wolfgang suggested with the streaming of classical music, for example, but putting together the data we have from the online world and digital world, and really building with these numbers the clever scientific audience development based on really calling the non-goers and out of the bubble people from the traditional live shows and audiences. I think this is really a future, and if asset data could be really used as a starting point for combining with the digital world, I think this would be very, very helpful and forward-thinking thing. Thank you.
Thank you too. Yeah, I think it will be very interesting to see in the following days that how the arts organization and arts world will react to the situation we've been dealing here in the Czech Republic a lot, but also in other countries in not much lower intensity, let's say. Do you think, Wolfgang, that there's some special other ways to collect data on our audience, or the ways to predict the changes in the audience demand, and maybe in, let's say, and some conclusions already, how to change the cultural policies and the institutions which we heard are not really ready to react to the changing environment?
Yes, absolutely. As Jussi said, there are so many data points already there, and many theaters used even before the pandemic, but even now they did a lot of social media activities, podcasts, so many things going on, so many data are collected. But what we experience that these data are not connected. So they are collected, they're in data silos, but you don't know. So if you take social media, for example, every theater has its own social media department, and a lot of money is invested into social media. They post, they make stories, they are even on Twitch, everybody is everywhere. But if I ask them, who are your social media followers? How many tickets are you selling on social media? Do you know who they are? How can you reach out to them? Then the only option is to pay money to Facebook and these kind of guys. So I think we have to be more independent. These are your fans. These are your theater lovers. You need to own the data. And this is, and you need to be in the driver's seat. And I think this is key. You can't be dependent on others, one thing. Second, influence on data policy, on policymakers. If we look at it, I think from a policy point of view, at least in the German-speaking markets, a lot of public money goes into theaters. And I like the numbers Darko was saying about 2 million tickets sold, 4 million visitors. If I take it for Vienna, for instance, we have 2 million inhabitants. Only the national theaters have already 1.5 million tickets sold. But even they get subsidy about 150 million. So every single ticket is subsidized with 100 euros. So this means this is, well, it's a little bit lower maybe in the last few years, but approximately. So a lot of public money goes there. So we have to justify that money. And one is, it's for tourism and economic point of view. Okay, good. Vienna, many tourists come, people just fly over from Japan to go one night to the Vienna State Opera. So a lot of additional money in hotels and restaurants, everyone. But the second one, I think this is even more important. Art and culture is so important for society. I'm convinced that people being exposed to arts and culture are getting, I don't know, paraphrased, better people. I know people who are more aware of things, more reflected people. And I think this is what Maya also said before. It's all really important also for a democracy, that people are reflected, think about things, go voting, and everything is somehow connected. So we need to make sure that arts institutions are more easily accessible. And if I talk about barriers to entry, okay, like Maya said before, financial means. Sure, there are a lot of things going on, like for unemployed people that they can go for free, or for young people who don't have the money, or young families, whatever. So I think many programs are in place already. The other one is distance. So I think we could help with digital offers to stay connected. The third one is, like what Maya said, being disabled people or older people who can't move that easily. Maybe streaming can help, accessibility. But the other one, I think this is the most important thing on the non-goers, it's just not on their agenda. If they think about what we're doing tonight or what we're doing on the weekend, it's not on the agenda to go to the theater. It's not on the agenda to go to a concert or go to the opera. There are so many other distractions, and everything really easy accessible. So we need to make sure theaters, go to theater is on the agenda. We need to be relevant. And digital means help. They can help us to put us on the agenda. They can help us, like with mobile apps. You're on the home screen. They see you all the time. You get in their brain. But it's also about lowering barriers for entry. As I said before, with the opera examples or music theaters. For many people, going to 4-hour opera, it's too long. So one, if you make the service, people they don't like to go to 4 hours opera. Or the other ones, no, I don't fit there. I don't know how to behave there. So that's like what the Vienna State Opera did, that they opened general rehearsals to just young people. This is, and Salzburg Festival did similar stuff. 400 euros tickets for 25 euros, or I don't know, 200 euros tickets for 10 euros, then the young people are without them, and they get a taste, you know, and with the eating comes the appetite, and I think this is important.
For that point, you mentioned the important thing, the democracy, so let me please bring the question of democratization also in distribution of the culture. We've also set up one of the topics as the imbalance of the cultural consumption between rural and metropolitan regions. We had some interesting findings in that terms in Prague from the asset project data, which I mentioned earlier today. Do you see that as a problem also in your country, and is the situation in data mining, let's say, on the audience and audience research and audience development also appealing, let's say, maybe in Finland, Mario? Mario, may I have the question on you? How's the situation in Finland in terms of distribution of the cultural consumption between rural and metropolitan regions? What the data shows maybe about that? And is there some measures taken in the cultural policy?
Well, yeah, I honestly have to say that we haven't done very much research about this, but it's a big a problem that now Finland is a big area, and we are quite few. So I think in the metropolitan area it's no problem, but in northern Finland this is really a problem, and I think what kind of measures has taken the ministry and the municipalities are giving a lot of support. For example, these libraries on wheel, these buses that go around in area, but. And we have done some accessibility research, counting how many kilometers people have to the nearest cultural venue or theater, and yeah, the further you go, the longer the distances are getting. So. This is a kind of a problem, so that in smaller villages or in northern Finland there is few services, of course.
Yeah, maybe the digital shift, vastly accelerated by the coronavirus crisis in all of our countries, has opened some of the ways that this kind of problems and the accessibility problems in general might be solved, or their impact might be reduced. So maybe let's move to the last topic, because the time is moving fast. What is your views on the future and the change of the cultural consumption and the demand on the side of the audiences, and in the cultural consumption in near future in general? Will the digital somehow replace maybe some of the art consumption, or is it an augmented part of the new role of the cultural institutions, as which can enhance the access and the let's say communication with the audience, as Wolfgang suggested, right? Maybe Darko, how about the impacts and the shift in Croatia? I know you have some more slides ready for it.
Yeah, the colleagues and collaborators from Foundation Kultura Nova just completed the first research based on the data from the 74 different independent organizations, small theaters, independent theater festivals, and similar organizations. And just in short, the result is very interesting in especially in area of imbalance, as we have been speaking before. The negative impact for the organizations of the COVID pandemic, they are highly dependent on region, on the economic environment, urbanization, infrastructure, and demography. And resistance of the organization to pandemic influences are directly correlated with their geographical position, economical development of the region, demography of the city or region, and level of their inner organization capacity, meaning technological abilities as well. So the research showed that some of the organizations even improved their communication with the audience during the COVID lockdown, and some of them completely or almost completely lost connection with their audience. And this is also, as far as this first research shows, very, very strongly connected with the area, metropolitan or rural area, with the economical, demographic, and even political environment in the region.
Thank you. We have only about 5 minutes left, so there's a last opportunity for your statements on that or any other topic that is appealing for you. So Wolfgang, please have your floor. Okay, Jonathan, please be quick, and Wolfgang will go after.
I think it's very interesting what was just said, and I think that one of the interesting things where research can be useful is actually dispelling some myths. So, for example, one of the things we've done in the UK, we've been able to do a population-wide survey of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and what it's shown is two really things which were surprising. Maybe first was that inequality of cultural participation increased during the pandemic. So even in spite of digital online accessibility and the increase in some areas of it, the people who were highly engaged were still highly engaged, people who were low engaged were even lower engaged. So it was an actual increase in equality. A lot of that was to do with the background things to do with the economics of it. The other thing we found is that in terms of people going back, this relates a little bit to what Darko was saying about the relationships. People are reluctant to go back. I know we're making an assumption that people are desperate to go back to the theatre. We're not finding that. And for example, in the UK, it's a very high rate of vaccination, but the people who are highly vaccinated are not immediately dashing out to the theatre. They don't show that intention. That will probably change, but it's the sort of thing we need to be aware of. It's like the actual evidence sometimes goes contrary to a narrative that might be happening elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you. Very important point. Thank you for that. We're really all facing the quite demanding times, I think, when getting back to what we used to call normal, which might be a bit different from what we've known. May I give the last words to Wolfgang now?
Thank you. I just want to, what you said before, Jonathan, before, it's too early to tell from the data point in Austria, as we had 2 months reopening in September, October, basically, and now we reopened last week, so it's 7 days, and it's still kind of, Vienna especially is very dependent on tourists, and we still have travel restrictions, so from a personal opinion, I agree with you that I see some reluctance, or I saw some reluctance in September and October. Now we see how with the vaccination going on with this. And to your question, Michael, about the digital, is it replacing? I don't think so. And the data we have don't show it. I think digital is going to be a supportive thing. It's an additional, we see it as a communication tool, so to communicate with your audience, customer communication tool, customer retention tool, that you stay in touch with your audience, but also customer acquisition tool that you can reach out to new audience. And I'm convinced it's here to stay. And if you use it wisely, it's going to help all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for those words. I definitely hope that you're right and agree that we need to use the new skills and digitalization to even more closely communicate with our audiences. Jiří, do you want to sum up for yourself?
Thank you very much. Well, I can confirm that I feel that there is actually probably a growth of attention or an attendance, but I'm not sure about the quality because people are switching on and off during the shows, and I really feel that the directors of the theaters in the beginning of the pandemic were actually waiting for it to go. And during the year, I have seen that they have actually came into terms with the situation and really understood the digital tools as a gateway to their theaters. So I hope that this approach will stay with us, because I really believe that we can attract much more new audiences and totally different groups that Wolfgang also mentioned when you put a small musical showcase into the application of an opera. You immediately hear the emotion, and it's much more than a text or a picture. So I think really what was unimaginable a year ago, that the digital world will so much get into such a analog phenomenon as live arts. We are now seeing a revolution that we couldn't really imagine, and which I'm really looking forward to your outcomes and your suggestions how to take advantage of that.
Thank you. Last floor to Mario, if you please. Sorry, I can't hear you. I hope it's not the case.
Sorry, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fine.
hard to see the microphone. So this digitalization is indeed very important thing, and like Wolfgang said, we need to improve also this kind of a virtual handshakes. If people are scared, like Jonathan said, I can believe that it's not easy to come together, but I'm positive and I'm optimist. I think that people will come together and maybe in a more or less hybrid way. We've been recently done some study in festivals when we had festivals year and a half ago. How people are using social media for branding, for attending, for communicating, and this shows also that people are willing to communicate through the different type of channels, but the physical presence is something that the magic of art and culture. I believe in it.
Thank you for the positive attitude. And do you share it, Darko? Do you want to sum up for your part?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I'm very, very happy that we are sharing the same opinion about usefulness of digital technologies after this crisis. Probably we would never be so strongly forced to learn about them without COVID impact. So it was, something good from this terrible year and a half of lockdown.
You're right.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you very much, your panelists. I think the future is full of challenges, which is kind of positive as well as it might get not so good. But definitely, we for the successful restart, definitely need to know what the audiences expect, because it might not be so easy to find the lost connection and relations. So we can't afford to take the blind shot, and so I think the audience research and audience development activities are more important than ever, and I think it has been argued by your arguments, by your opinions and facts you've brought to this very interesting panel. Thank you very much for that, and I will have to conclude today's program of the conference. Before we do that for the audience, we will have one more revelation, and that is the result of the last one poll we had running until now, which is on the watch party title. So you have decided what show, what performance will be on tonight at 7:30, and we are looking forward to share it with you. Before we find out from Martina, who will join me in the studio again, I most warmly want to welcome you for tomorrow's part. Tomorrow's part is the working part of our two-day event. It will be broadcasted or transmitted through Zoom only. The link is available to everybody registered for our conference. So if there's any of you watching us at YouTube or Facebook and you are not registered, so if you want to take part in tomorrow's very impressive workshop by Jonathan, I can tell that I participated already, or in I hope groundbreaking discussion on European Theatre Night and its future, then please still you can register and take advantage of the tomorrow's program of our on-demand section, which you will receive information to your email when you register, or and of course you could join us on the watch party tonight. So Martina, what shall we share as a culture experience tonight?
Well, you can have many cultural experiences within the conference because if you registered, then through your email you have access to more shows and performances and teasers from all the partners, all the asset partners. But there is just one production which won the watch party poll. So, Michal, shall we repeat what were the two options where our attendees were able to vote for?
So, the option one is an AI When Robot Writes a Play by 𝐶vandovo divadlo, a drama written by the artificial intelligence. And the second one is the 𝐫𝐞𝐞 performance by 𝐀𝐿78, or the last 𝐶irk sorry. And I'm really teased now, what shall we watch?
It's exciting. Who won this poll? So have you seen the shows?
I haven't seen the shows yet, so I'm really looking for it.
So I saw both, so actually I would recommend both of them, but just one is in the watch party. So let's open this paper I've got from the production team of the conference, and let's announce the result. Tonight you will be able to watch When Robot Writes a Play with 56% from the poll. 𝐫𝐞𝐞 won only 44, but never mind, you can watch this performance within the 2 conference days as well, because you've got the access through your registration. So maybe share tonight, this evening with us within the watch party, and maybe tomorrow you can watch other productions proposed by the conference team and the asset partners.
Thank you, Martina, for the revelation. I certainly will watch 𝐫𝐞𝐞 right after AI performance, and hopefully you will join us. And if we'll be even more glad if we also will see you in our conference tomorrow. We're starting at 1 a.m. Again of the Central European summertime, and we hope we'll have all of you again on board. Thank you to all the wonderful speakers, the panelists. Thank you, and see you tonight or tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.